When my son's fiancée, Tiffany, first saw my face, she didn't scream, she just laughed. A cold, cruel sound that cut deeper than any fire ever could. She looked at my scars, the purple ridges of melted skin that cover the left side of my face, and said loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "At least you don't need a Halloween mask, you are scary enough as it is." My son Jamal just sat there staring at his plate, too cowardly to defend the man who walked through hell to raise him. But Tiffany didn't know one thing. The people she was trying to impress, the wealthy, powerful parents she worshipped, owed their lives to these very scars. She wanted to humiliate a monster, but she was about to wake a sleeping giant. Before I tell you how I destroyed her perfect little world, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that true beauty is found in sacrifice, not in expensive clothes. My name is Thaddeus Moore, and I am 71 years old. For 30 years, I have lived with a face that makes children hide behind their mother's legs and makes strangers cross the street to avoid me. I was a firefighter in Chicago back when the gear was heavy and the fires were hotter. I earned every single mark on my skin. I wear them like medals, but to the rest of the world, I am just something broken, something ugly, to be pitied or ignored. I have spent the last decade in quiet solitude living in the small brick house I bought with my late wife Beatrice. It is a humble place, but it is paid for, and it is full of memories. I thought my fighting days were over. I thought the only battles left for me were against arthritis and loneliness. I was wrong. Last Friday night, my son Jamal called me. His voice was tight, nervous. He told me it was time. Time to meet the woman he was going to marry. Time to meet the famous Tiffany Sterling. I had heard about her for months. Jamal spoke of her like she was royalty. She was an influencer, he said. She had 50,000 followers on Instagram. She came from money, real money. Her parents were big shots in New York, and she was used to the finer things in life. Jamal told me to dress nice. He told me to wear my Sunday best. So I did. I put on my charcoal gray suit, the one I wore to Beatrice's funeral. It is a bit loose in the shoulders now since I have lost some weight, but it is clean and pressed. I polished my shoes until I could see my own distorted reflection in the leather. I wanted to make him proud. I wanted to show this girl that even though his father looks like a nightmare, he has the manners of a gentleman. I arrived at Le Monde exactly at 7 o'clock. It is one of those places where the lighting is dim and the menus don't have prices. The host, a young man with slicked back hair, hesitated when he saw me. His eyes went wide and flicked to the left side of my face, then quickly away. I am used to it. I just gave him my name and he led me to a table in the center of the room. Jamal was already there, looking handsome in a navy blue suit that I know he can't afford. And sitting next to him was Tiffany. She was beautiful, I will give her that. Blonde hair, perfectly styled skin that looked like porcelain, and enough diamonds on her fingers to feed a family for a year. But the moment I approached the table, the beauty vanished. Her eyes narrowed, her lip curled up in a sneer of pure disgust. She didn't stand up, she didn't offer her hand, she just took a sip of her wine and turned to Jamal. "Is this a joke?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, loud. Several heads at nearby tables turned to look. "You told me your father was injured in an accident, Jamal. You didn't tell me he looked like something out of a horror movie." I stood there, my hand hovering over the back of the chair. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a sudden sharp pain. Jamal looked down at the white tablecloth, his face burning red. "Tiffany, please be nice," Jamal whispered. "Nice," she scoffed. "I am being honest. Look at him. He is going to ruin the wedding photos. Imagine him standing next to my parents. My mother will faint." I pulled out the chair and sat down. I placed my hands on the table. My left hand is scarred too, the fingers stiff and curled slightly inward from the heat of that chemical fire back in '95. "Good evening to you too," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My name is Thaddeus. It is nice to meet you, Tiffany." She ignored me. She picked up her fork and stabbed at her salad like it had offended her. "So Jamal tells me you are retired," she said without looking at me. "What did you do?" "Janitor, garbage collector." "I was a captain in the Chicago Fire Department," I said. "I served this city for 40 years. She laughed again. That same cold, cruel sound. "A fireman. Well, clearly you weren't very good at it if you let yourself get burned like that." I felt a flash of anger, hot and sudden. I wanted to tell her about the building that collapsed. about the chemicals that melted through my gear, about the two people I carried out on my back while my own skin was sizzling. But I looked at Jamal. He was pleading with me with his eyes. He kicked my foot gently under the table, a silent signal. "Don't make a scene, Dad. Please." So I swallowed my pride. I picked up the menu. It was heavy bound in leather. "We are not here to talk about my job," I said. "We are here to celebrate your engagement. I am happy for you, son." Tiffany snatched the menu out of my hand. Her nails were long and painted a blood red. "Don't bother looking at that," she said. "They don't serve fried chicken or whatever it is you are used to eating, and besides, the prices here would give you a heart attack." She signaled the waiter for another bottle of champagne, a bottle that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. "Speaking of money," she said, leaning forward, her eyes gleaming with greed, "we need to talk about the wedding. We found a venue, the Grand Ballroom at the Ritz. It is perfect. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the works. But they need a deposit. $50,000. By tomorrow." I looked at Jamal. He finally looked up at me, his eyes wet with desperation. "Dad," Jamal said, his voice shaking, We were hoping you could help us. You still have that settlement money, right? From the accident. The settlement money. The compensation the city gave me for losing half my face and the use of my left lung. That money was my safety net. It was what I lived on. It was what was supposed to pay for my care when I got too old to walk. "That is a lot of money, Jamal," I said slowly. "Oh, come on," Tiffany interrupted. "Do not be stingy. What are you going to spend it on anyway? Plastic surgery. It is a little late for that, isn't it? Just give us the money, consider it an investment in your son's happiness, or do you want him to be miserable?" She was manipulating him right in front of me, treating him like a puppy she could kick and then command. And he was letting her. That was what hurt the most. My son, the boy I raised to be strong and proud, was shrinking into nothingness next to this woman. "I will write the check," I said. Jamal's face lit up. "Really, Dad? Thank you. Thank you so much." But I continued, raising my voice just enough to cut through the chatter of the restaurant. "I have one condition." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Of course there is a condition. What is it?" "You want to give a speech. Please say no." "No," I said. "I want to be at the wedding. Front row. I want to see my son get married." Silence fell over the table. Tiffany looked at Jamal, then back at me. She let out a short, incredulous breath. "Front row," she repeated. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" I asked. "Because look at you," she hissed, leaning across the table, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You are hideous. My parents are coming from New York. They are the Sterlings. Do you know who they are? They are important. They are refined. They don't associate with burnt toast." My hands clenched into fists on the table. "Burnt toast. That is what she called me," Tiffany, Jamal said weakly. "That is not fair. He is my dad." "Then put him in the back," she snapped. "Way in the back. Or better yet, put him in the overflow room with the staff. He can watch on a screen. But I am not having that face in my professional video. I am not having him scare my guests." She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "So those are the terms, old man. You give us the check and you can come. But you stay out of sight. You stay in the shadows where you belong. Take it or leave it." I looked at my son. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to tell her that his father was a hero, that his father sat in the front row, or there would be no wedding. I waited for the Jamal I knew, but that Jamal was gone. He just looked down at his lap again and whispered, "Please, Dad, just do it for me. She is under a lot of stress." My heart broke in that moment. It cracked right down the middle. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my checkbook. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from rage. I uncapped my pen. "Fine," I said. I wrote the check, $50,000. I tore it out and placed it on the table. Tiffany snatched it up instantly, her eyes lighting up like she had just won the lottery. She kissed the paper. Finally, she said, tucking it into her purse. "Now that wasn't so hard, was it? You can go now. We have friends coming to join us for drinks, and frankly, you do not fit the vibe." I stood up. My knees popped. I looked down at the two of them, the beautiful monster and my coward of a son. "I will see you at the wedding," I said. "Oh," and Thaddeus, Tiffany called out as I turned to leave. "Make sure you wear a mask or something, maybe a bag." We don't want you making the flower girls cry." I walked out of Le Monde. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't cool the fire burning inside me. I walked to my old Ford truck, sat in the driver's seat, and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I traced the line of the scar that runs from my temple down to my jaw. They think I am weak. They think I am just an old man with a checkbook. They think they can take my dignity and bury it under their expensive flowers and marble floors. I started the engine. The truck roared to life. "You want the Sterlings to see me, Tiffany," I whispered to the empty cab. "You want to make sure your parents are impressed." "Oh, they will be impressed, all right, because you don't know who saved them from the fire that made them rich. You don't know who carried them out of hell 30 years ago." I shifted the truck into gear. "I am not going to sit in the back. I am going to burn your whole show to the ground. And I am going to do it with the truth." I drove home alone in the dark, plotting my next move. The check was cashed the next morning. I got the notification on my phone. $50,000 gone. But that was okay. It was the price of admission. The price of a front row seat to the justice that was coming. When I got home, I went straight to the basement. I pushed aside boxes of old clothes and Christmas decorations until I found it. A dusty old metal footlocker. I opened it, and the smell of smoke and old rubber filled the air. My old turnout gear, my helmet, and at the bottom beneath a stack of faded newspapers was a file. I opened the file. The paper was yellowed and brittle. It was the incident report from October 12, 1995, the chemical plant fire. The names were right there typed in black ink. Victims rescued Robert and Claire Sterling. I ran my finger over the names. "I saved your lives," I said softly, "and your daughter just called me burnt toast." I closed the file. The game had just begun. Tiffany wanted a show. I was going to give her one she would never forget. My house has always been my sanctuary. It is a small, single-story brick building in the south side of Chicago, the kind with a porch that needs painting and a lawn that I cut myself every Saturday morning. It is not a palace like the ones Tiffany is used to, but it is paid for. Every brick, every beam holds a memory of Beatrice. When I walked through the front door after that disastrous dinner at Le Monde, the silence of the house, usually a comfort, felt heavy like a lead blanket. I tossed my keys on the small table by the door, the one with the wobbly leg that I keep meaning to fix. My reflection caught me in the hallway mirror. The scars on the left side of my face looked angry under the harsh yellow light of the hallway bulb. I touched the raised skin. Burnt toast, that is what she called me. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I heard the tires screech in the driveway. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps pounded up the porch stairs. I knew who it was. I didn't turn around as the front door flew open. "Dad, wait." It was Jamal. He was out of breath, his expensive suit jacket flapping open. He looked frantic. For a split second, a foolish, hopeful part of me thought he had come to apologize. I thought maybe he had left Tiffany at the restaurant to come and tell me that I mattered more than a wedding venue, that he was sorry for letting her humiliate me. I turned to face him slowly. He was standing in my living room, looking around with that same expression he always wore lately. Disdain. He looked at the old beige sofa with the crochet blanket Beatrice had made. He looked at the faded wallpaper. "Jesus, Dad," Jamal said, running a hand through his hair. "Why do you keep the house so cold? It is freezing in here, and it smells like old people. It smells like clean laundry and hard work," I said, my voice low. "What do you want, Jamal? Did Tiffany send you to finish the job? Did she forget an insult?" Jamal sighed, exasperated. He walked further into the room, pacing back and forth on the worn carpet. "Don't be dramatic, Dad. She is just stressed. You have to understand. She has a vision. This wedding is huge for her career. Her followers expect perfection. And her parents. The Sterlings are intense people. She is just trying to manage expectations." "Manage expectations," I repeated. "Is that what you call it when you let someone treat your father like a stray dog?" Jamal stopped pacing. He looked at me, and his eyes dropped to my jacket pocket, the pocket where I kept my checkbook. He didn't come for me. He came for the money. "Look, Dad," he said, his tone shifting, becoming wheedling. "We really need that deposit. The Ritz won't hold the date past tomorrow morning. If we lose that venue, Tiffany will be devastated. And if she is unhappy, I am unhappy." I walked over to my old armchair and sat down heavily. My joints ached. I looked at my son. He was 28 years old, physically strong, healthy. but inside he was hollow. "You think I am just a stingy old man, don't you?" I asked. Jamal threw his hands up. "Well, aren't you? You have been sitting on that settlement money for 30 years. $3 million, Dad. And you live like this. You drive a truck that belongs in a junkyard. You wear suits from the 90s. Why? What are you saving it for? You are not going to live forever." He didn't understand. He never did. "That money isn't a lottery win, Jamal," I said sharply. "That money is compensation for the life I lost. It is for the lungs that don't work right when it is humid. It is for the face that scares children. It is insurance so that I never have to be a burden on you." "I don't want your money when you are dead," Jamal snapped. "I need it now. I need to start my life. This wedding is my entry into a new world, Tiffany's world. If I can't put down this deposit, she is going to think I am a failure." "Do you want your son to be a failure?" He was using guilt, a weapon he had sharpened over years of me being too soft on him. He knew I would do anything for him. He knew that despite everything I loved him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the checkbook. The leather was warm from my body heat. Jamal's eyes locked onto it like a starving man looking at a steak. He actually took a step forward, his hand twitching. "I will write the check," I said, opening the book. "Thank you, Dad." Jamal let out a breath he had been holding. "Thank you. I promise I will pay you back. Once the business takes off." I held up a hand to stop him. I uncapped my pen. It was a cheap plastic pen, the kind you get for free at the bank. $50,000. I wrote the date. I wrote his name. I wrote the amount. My handwriting was jagged but clear. I didn't tear the check out yet. I looked up at him. "One condition," I said. Jamal froze. "What?" "I come to the wedding, and I sit in the front row, next to you. Not in the back, not in the corner. Front row. On the groom's side." Jamal swallowed hard. He looked away, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The silence stretched out thin and tight. "Dad," he started, his voice strained. "About that." I waited. My grip on the checkbook tightened. "Tiffany and I talked on the way over here," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "We really appreciate the money, truly. But the front row is very visible. The videographers are going to be right there. The lighting is very bright." So I asked, "So, Tiffany thinks it might be better if you sat in the suite." "The suite?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Yeah," Jamal said, gaining a little speed, now trying to sell it. "It is the private VIP suite. Upstairs. It has a balcony looking down on the ballroom. You would have your own food, your own drinks. It is very fancy. You would be comfortable there, and you wouldn't have to deal with people staring. You know how you hate people staring." He was framing it like a kindness, like he was doing me a favor by hiding me away. "She wants to put me in a box," I said, "like a piece of broken furniture you store in the attic." "No, Dad, it is not like that. It is exactly like that," I shouted, slamming the checkbook onto the side table. The sound made Jamal jump. "She is ashamed of me, and you are ashamed of me." Jamal didn't deny it. He just looked miserable. "Dad, please, just be reasonable. The Sterlings, they are different. They judge on appearances. If they see you sitting there, it might cause a scene. Tiffany is just trying to protect the dignity of the event. The dignity of the event." The words tasted like bile in my throat. I tore the check out of the book. The ripping sound was loud in the quiet room. I held it up between two fingers. The paper was crisp and clean, worth more than this entire house. "Here is the deal, Jamal," I said, standing up. I towered over him. Even with my bad back, I was still bigger than him, still stronger where it counted. "You take this check and I sit in the front row, or you walk out of here with nothing and you explain to your princess why you can't pay for her party." Jamal looked at the check. Then he looked at me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. I saw him weighing his father's pride against his fiancée's wrath. It wasn't even a contest. He reached out and took the check. "Fine," he whispered. "Front row. I will tell her." He didn't look happy. He looked terrified. He knew he was going home to a war. But he took the money. He folded it quickly and shoved it into his pocket as if it burned him. He turned to leave. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say "I love you." He just walked to the door, his shoulders hunched. "Jamal," I called out. He stopped, hand on the doorknob. "Don't spend it all in one place," I said. "And tell Tiffany I am looking forward to meeting her parents. I have a feeling we have a lot to talk about." Jamal didn't respond. He opened the door and walked out into the night. I heard his car start up and speed away, leaving me alone in the silence of my sanctuary. I walked to the window and watched his taillights disappear down the street. I felt a profound sadness, a hollowness in my chest where my heart used to be. My son had sold me out for $50,000 and a quiet life. But then the sadness turned into something else, something colder, something harder. I went back to the basement. I picked up the file again, the file with the names Robert and Claire Sterling. "You want me in the VIP suite, Tiffany," I muttered to myself. "You want me invisible." I opened the file and pulled out a small glossy photograph clipped to the back of the report. It was a picture of me 30 years ago standing outside the smoking ruins of the factory. My face was bandaged, but my eyes were visible, and standing next to me shaking my hand was a young man in a torn suit. Robert Sterling. He looked grateful. He looked humble. I wondered if he remembered. I wondered if the money and the years had washed away the memory of the fire. There is only one way to find out. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Sam, it is Thaddeus," I said. "Thad, is everything okay? You never call this late. I need a favor, Sam. You still have that contact at the city archives? The one who handles the old press footage?" "Yeah, sure." "Why? I need the videotape, Sam. The news footage from the Sterling chemical plant fire, October 12th, 1995. There was a pause on the other end. "Thad, you haven't watched that stuff in decades. You said you never wanted to see it again." "I changed my mind," I said, staring at the empty spot in the driveway where my son used to be. "I need it digitized, and I need it ready by the weekend." "What are you planning, Thad?" Sam asked, his voice suspicious. "I am planning a wedding gift," I said. "A surprise?" I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator upstairs. They wanted a show. They wanted a perfect, picture-perfect wedding. Well, I was going to give them something real. I was going to give them the truth, even if I had to burn down their fantasy to do it. Jamal had taken the check. He had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I wasn't just going to attend this wedding, I was going to hijack it. And when the dust settled, everyone would know exactly who Thaddeus Moore really was. The morning after I handed over $50,000 to my son, I woke up with a singular purpose. If I was going to sit in the front row of the most expensive wedding in Chicago, I was not going to look like the charity case Tiffany thought I was. I wanted to look like a father who was proud. I wanted to look like a man who belonged. Tiffany had sent a text message to Jamal, which he forwarded to me with the address of a specific tailor shop downtown. She said it was the only place she trusted with the wedding aesthetic. It was called the Gilded Stitch. The name alone sounded expensive. I drove my truck into the city, navigating through traffic that seemed to get more aggressive every year. I parked 3 blocks away because my rusted Ford would have looked like a stain in front of the valet stand. I walked the rest of the way, smoothing down the front of my old windbreaker. The shop was all glass and chrome. In the window, headless mannequins wore suits that cost more than my first car. I took a deep breath, pushed open the heavy glass door, and stepped inside. The air smelled of espresso and expensive cologne. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you conscious of how loud your own shoes are on the marble floor. A young man stood behind a sleek white counter. He was thin, with hair slicked back so tight it looked painful, in a suit that fit him like a second skin. He looked up as I approached. His eyes didn't meet mine. They scanned my shoes, my worn jeans, and finally settled on the left side of my face. He didn't flinch. He just sneered. It was a subtle tightening of the lips, but I had seen it 1,000 times before. "Can I help you?" he asked. His tone suggested that the only help I needed was directions to the nearest exit. "My name is Thaddeus Moore," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am here for a fitting for the Sterling Moore wedding." The young man didn't move to check the computer. He didn't check a list. He just leaned back against the counter and crossed his arms. "Ah, yes, Mr. Moore. We were expecting you." "Good," I said. "I would like to see your charcoal fabrics. I prefer a classic cut, something that breathes." The clerk let out a short, dry laugh. He shook his head slowly, looking at me with a mix of pity and amusement. "I think there has been a misunderstanding, Mr. Moore. We are not making you a suit." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "My son said this is where the wedding party is being outfitted." "The wedding party, yes," the clerk said. "The groom, the groomsmen, the fathers. But Ms. Sterling called ahead personally this morning. She gave us very specific instructions regarding your attire." He reached under the counter and pulled out a plastic garment bag. It was thin and cheap, the kind you get from a costume rental shop. He tossed it onto the counter. It slid across the marble and stopped in front of me. "What is this?" I asked, not touching it. "It is a standard service uniform," the clerk said. "Black trousers, white shirt, and a black vest. It is what the waitstaff will be wearing. Ms. Sterling felt that given your condition, it would be best if you blended in with the help. That way, if you need to move around the room, you won't draw unnecessary attention to yourself." I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just an insult. It was a calculated strike. She wanted me to wear a servant's uniform at my own son's wedding. She wanted to erase me completely. "I am not a waiter," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I am the father of the groom." The clerk shrugged, picking at a non-existent piece of lint on his sleeve. "Look, old man, I don't make the rules. I just follow orders. And frankly, it is a generous offer. We don't usually allow people like you in here at all." "People like me," I repeated. You know, he gestured vaguely at his own face. "Disfigured. It scares the other clientele. We sell beauty here. We sell perfection. We don't tailor for monsters." The word hung in the air. Monster. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. The old firefighter in me, the one who had broken down doors and carried grown men over his shoulders, wanted to reach across the counter and teach this boy a lesson in respect. I wanted to shatter the glass and the silence. But I didn't. That is what Tiffany wanted. She wanted the angry black man. She wanted the scene. I took out my phone. My fingers were trembling, but I dialed Jamal's number. I needed him to hear this. I needed him to tell me that this was a mistake. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times. Then it went to voicemail. "Hey, this is Jamal. I'm busy making moves. Leave a message." I looked at the phone. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. In a room full of mirrors that reflected my scars back at me from every angle. My son wasn't answering. He had turned off his phone or he was ignoring me. Either way, the message was clear. I was on my own. I put the phone away. I looked at the clerk, who was now smirking openly. "Keep the uniform," I said. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just walked. I walked past the valet stand, past the high-end boutiques, past the people who looked away as I passed. I got into my truck and sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I started the engine and drove south. I drove away from the skyscrapers and the marble floors. I drove until the streets became familiar, until the potholes became deeper and the buildings became lower. I drove back to my neighborhood, the South Side. I pulled up in front of a small shop tucked between a bodega and a barber shop. The sign above the door was hand-painted and peeling slightly. Henderson's Bespoke Tailoring, Esta 1970. I hadn't been here in 20 years, not since Beatrice died. A bell jingled as I pushed the door open. The smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of steam, iron chalk wool, and pipe tobacco. It smelled like dignity. The shop was cluttered. Rolls of fabric were stacked against the walls. An old radio was playing jazz in the corner. Behind the counter, an old man with snowy white hair and glasses thick as bottle bottoms was sewing a button onto a jacket. He didn't look up immediately. "Be right with you," he said, his voice raspy and warm like worn leather. I stood there waiting, letting the atmosphere settle my nerves. Mr. Henderson looked up. He squinted, adjusting his glasses. He looked at my face. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He stood up slowly, a smile spreading across his wrinkled face. "Lord have mercy," he said, coming around the counter. "Is that Captain Moore?" "Thaddeus Moore." "It's me, Arthur," I said. Arthur Henderson walked up to me and extended a hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, strong. "I haven't seen you since the memorial service," he said. You look like you have been carrying a heavy load, brother." "I have," I said. "I really have." "What brings you to my humble shop?" Arthur asked. "My son is getting married," I said. "And I need a suit, a real suit, not a costume." Arthur nodded solemnly. He understood. He didn't need to ask why I wasn't at the fancy shops downtown. He knew. "You came to the right place," he said. "Step up onto the podium, Captain. Let's see what we are working with." I stepped onto the small wooden platform in front of the 3-way mirror. Arthur took his tape measure from around his neck. He moved with the grace of a man who had done this 1,000,000 times. He measured my chest. Broad, he muttered. Still strong. He moved to measure my neck. His hands brushed against the scars on the left side of my face. The clerk at the other shop wouldn't even look at them. Arthur touched them as if they were just another part of me. That fire took a lot from you, didn't it? Arthur said softly as he measured my shoulder width. It took my face, I said. Arthur stopped. He looked me in the eye through the mirror. No, Captain. It took your skin. It didn't take your face. And it certainly didn't take your man. You are the same man who pulled my nephew out of that apartment fire in '89. You are the same man who led this community. Don't let anyone tell you different. I felt a lump rise in my throat. This was what I had been starving for. Not the fabric, not the cut. The respect, the acknowledgement that I was still human. He pulled a roll of fabric from the shelf. It was a deep, midnight blue wool. This is Italian import, Arthur said, patting the bolt of cloth. I was saving it for a special occasion. I think this is it. We are going to make you look like a King Thaddeus. When you walk into that church, heads are going to turn. Not because they are scared, but because they know a man of substance has entered the room. He set to work. He pinned and tucked and measured. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like a monster. I felt like a father preparing for his son's wedding. As I stood there watching Arthur work, I made a vow. I would wear this suit. I would walk into that wedding with my head held high. And when I played that tape, when I revealed the truth, I would do it with the dignity of a king, just like Arthur said. Tiffany wanted me to disappear. She wanted me to be a ghost in a waiter's vest. But ghosts don't wear midnight blue Italian wool. I paid Arthur in cash. He tried to give me a discount, but I refused. Full price, I said. Quality costs. I walked out of Henderson's tailoring feeling different. The shame from the morning was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I had my armor now. The battle was coming. And I was ready. 2 days later, a car pulled into my driveway that cost more than my entire neighborhood. It was a white Porsche SUV gleaming under the afternoon sun like a pearl dropped in the mud. I was sitting on my porch rocker peeling an orange, just watching. I knew who it was even before the door opened. It was Tiffany. She stepped out of the car wearing oversized sunglasses and a cream-colored pantsuit that looked like it would stain if you even looked at it wrong. She stood by her car for a moment, looking at my house with a mixture of confusion and horror. She looked at the peeling paint on the railings. She looked at the slightly overgrown azalea bushes. She wrinkled her nose as if she could smell the poverty from 50 feet away. She didn't walk up the path immediately. She took a tissue from her purse and covered her nose and mouth before taking hesitant steps toward the porch. It was a performance. A cruel theatrical display to show me exactly where I stood in her world. I didn't stand up. I didn't stop peeling my orange. I just waited. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't come up. She didn't want to step on the wood I had laid with my own hands. "Thaddeus," she said. Her voice was muffled by the tissue. I nodded slowly. "Hello, Tiffany. Would you like to come in? I have some iced tea in the fridge." She recoiled as if I had offered her poison. "No, thank you. I am in a rush. I have appointments with the florist and the lighting designer. I just came to drop this off." She reached into her oversized designer bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She held it out at arm's length like it was a dirty diaper. I sighed, wiping my hands on my handkerchief, and slowly walked down the stairs to take it. Up close, I could see the heavy makeup caked on her face, hiding whatever human flaws might be underneath. She smelled of expensive vanilla and disdain. "What is this?" I asked, weighing the envelope in my hand. "It is the script," she said, lowering the tissue slightly now that she realized I wasn't going to bite her. "The script." I laughed dryly. "I didn't know we were acting in a movie." "It is the wedding protocol," she corrected sharply. "For the family, or rather for you. Since Jamal is too weak to explain the realities of the situation to you, I decided to do it myself. Read it, sign it, and follow it." I opened the envelope right there in the driveway. Inside was a document titled Guest Conduct Agreement. I flipped through the pages. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read. It wasn't just a schedule, it was an erasure. Page 1. Thaddeus Moore will be listed in the program as a distant relative, not father of the groom. Page 2. Thaddeus Moore will arrive 10 minutes before the ceremony and be seated in the designated obscured seating area. Page 3. Thaddeus Moore will not appear in any official photographs. Page 4. And this was the one that made my blood run cold. Immediately following the exchange of vows, Thaddeus Moore will quietly exit the venue. He is not invited to the reception dinner or the after party. I looked up at her. The sun was reflecting off her sunglasses, making it impossible to see her eyes. "You want me to leave before dinner?" I asked. "Before the toasts? Before the first dance?" Tiffany sighed theatrically, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "Look, Thaddeus, let's be adults about this. My parents are flying in from New York. The Sterlings. Do you understand what that name means? They are high society. They are used to beauty, elegance, and perfection. My father, Robert Sterling, is a very particular man. He has a weak heart. He cannot be shocked." I froze. The name hung in the humid air between us. Robert Sterling. "Your father?" I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my mind was racing back 30 years to a burning building. "He is a particular man, is he?" "He is a perfectionist," Tiffany said, puffing out her chest. "He has given me everything. He expects this wedding to be the event of the season. If he sees you sitting there looking like that, it will ruin his appetite. It will ruin the mood. People will stop looking at the bride and start looking at the monster in the front row. I cannot allow that." I felt a strange calmness wash over me. It was the calm before the backdraft. She didn't know. She had no idea that the man she worshipped, the man whose reputation she was trying to protect, was the same man I had dragged out of a melting elevator shaft. She didn't know that the only reason Robert Sterling had a heart to be weak was because I had kept it beating. I looked at the document again. Distant uncle. Leave at 2 p.m. "So let me get this straight," I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen, pretending to check the time, but actually opening the voice recorder app. I held the phone loosely at my side, my thumb hovering over the red button. "You are saying that if I want to see my son get married, I have to pretend I am not his father. And I have to leave before the food is served because my face is too ugly for your parents to look at. Is that right?" I pressed record. Tiffany rolled her eyes. She crossed her arms, defensive and arrogant. "Don't twist my words, Thaddeus. I am saying that you don't fit the aesthetic. This is a black tie event. It is for beautiful people, successful people. You are a retired civil servant with a deformity. You are lucky I am letting you come to the ceremony at all. Most brides would have banned you completely." I nodded slowly, feeding her more rope. "And your parents, the Sterlings. They would agree with this. They would want the man who raised Jamal to be kicked out like a stray dog." "My parents trust my judgment," Tiffany snapped. "They don't know you exist, and frankly, it is better that way. My father believes Jamal comes from a tragic background, that he is an orphan. It makes for a better story. A self-made man, not the son of a whatever you are. So yes, Thaddeus, this is the deal. Sign the paper or I will have security stop you at the door. I have already hired off-duty police officers. They won't hesitate to remove a trespasser. I have it, I thought. I have every word." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the designer clothes and the layers of makeup, she was rot, pure rot. But she was also a fool. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out a pen. I clicked it. "Okay, Tiffany," I said. "You win." I placed the envelope on the hood of her white Porsche. I signed my name at the bottom of the last page. Thaddeus Moore. She smiled then. A triumphant, predatory smile. She snatched the paper back and shoved it into her bag. "Good choice," she said. "I am glad you are finally being reasonable. Just stick to the script, Thaddeus. Sit down, shut up, and then leave. Do that, and we won't have any problems." She turned and marched back to the driver's side of her car. She opened the door and paused, looking back at me one last time. "Oh, and Thaddeus, do try to find a better mask. The medical one makes you look like a patient. Try a scarf, or maybe just a heavy veil." She laughed at her own joke, got in the car, and reversed out of the driveway. I watched her go. I watched the dust settle on the road. I stopped the recording on my phone. I pressed play. Her voice, shrill and cruel, filled the quiet air of my front yard. "It makes for a better story. A self-made man. Not the son of a whatever you are." I saved the file. I named it The Truth. I walked back up the stairs to my porch. I sat down in my rocker and picked up my orange. It was warm now from the sun. "You are right, Tiffany," I whispered to the empty street. "The Sterlings are coming. And you are right about one other thing. They don't like to be shocked." I went inside and went straight to the basement. I pulled out the digitized video file that Sam had sent me that morning. I had watched it 3 times already. But now I watched it with a new purpose. On the screen, a shaky camera zoomed in on a young firefighter carrying a man out of the smoke. The man in the firefighter's arms was coughing, his face blackened with soot but alive. The reporter's voice crackled through the speakers. "Captain Moore has just pulled the last survivor from the building. It is a miracle, folks." I paused the video on the face of the survivor. Robert Sterling, young, terrified, and alive. I looked at the wedding agreement on the table. Distant uncle. I picked up a marker and drew a big red X over the document. "No," I said aloud. "Not distant uncle. Hero. And next Saturday everyone is going to know it." I spent the rest of the evening preparing. I wasn't just going to attend a wedding. I was going to execute a military operation. I called Arthur at the tailor shop. "Is the suit ready?" I asked. "It will be ready tomorrow," Captain Arthur replied. "Good. Add a pocket square," I said. "Red. Bright red. Like fire." I hung up. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. I ate it standing up, looking out the window at the garden Beatrice had planted. She used to say that the truth always comes out in the wash. Well, the wash was coming. I thought about Jamal, my poor weak son. He was going to be hurt by this. There was no avoiding it, but sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it properly. He needed to see Tiffany for who she really was. He needed to see that the glitter of the Sterling name was just a reflection of the fire I walked through. I went to bed early that night. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The script was written, but Tiffany didn't know I had changed the ending. She thought she was the director of this show. She was wrong. She was just the villain. And the villain never wins in the end. Not in my house, not in my story. The night before the rehearsal dinner, the house was quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. Jamal was gone, probably at some fancy hotel preparing for his big day. Tiffany was somewhere in her high tower dreaming of her perfect wedding. And I was here alone in the kitchen, sitting under the buzzing yellow light of a single bulb. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a storm of memories and insults. Burnt toast, monster, waiter. The words echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of the empty house. I needed to remind myself of who I was. I needed to touch the proof that I wasn't just a disfigured old man, that I wasn't just a stain on my son's reputation. I walked to the living room cabinet. The glass door stuck a little bit as I pulled it open. On the bottom shelf, pushed behind a stack of old National Geographic magazines, was a small velvet box. It was blue once, a deep royal blue, but now it was faded to a dusty gray. I took it out. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than I remembered. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. Inside, resting on a bed of crushed satin, was the Medal of Valor, the highest honor the Chicago Fire Department can bestow. It was tarnished. The gold was dull, covered in a film of gray dust, just like me. I ran my thumb over the raised letters. For bravery above and beyond the call of duty. I went to the sink and got a soft cloth. I started to polish it. Small circular motions, rubbing away the years of neglect. As the gold began to shine again, as my reflection began to emerge in the metal, my mind drifted back. Back to that day. Back to the heat. October 12th, 1995. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Beatrice had made meatloaf for dinner and I was looking forward to it. The call came in at 4:00 p.m., an explosion at the Sterling chemical plant on the west side. When we rolled up, the sky was already black. But it wasn't just smoke. It was chemical fumes, green and purple, swirling like toxic clouds. The heat was intense enough to blister the paint on the truck from 50 yards away. Most of the workers had gotten out, but the foreman came running up to me screaming that the owners were still inside. They had been on the top floor doing an inspection when the blast hit. The elevators were dead. The stairs were blocked by debris. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I was 30 years younger, then strong, invincible. I grabbed my gear and I went in. I remember the sound of the fire. It doesn't crackle like a campfire. It roars. It sounds like a jet engine screaming in your ear. I fought my way up the stairs, my team behind me, but the ceiling collapsed on the 3rd floor, cutting me off from them. I was alone. I found them on the 4th floor, huddled in a corner near the elevator shaft, a young couple. The man was in a suit that was shredded and the woman was clinging to him, terrified. They were trapped. Above them a pipe had burst and was dripping a glowing viscous liquid. Chemical sludge. It was eating through the concrete floor. I grabbed them. I shoved them toward the only exit, a service stairwell that was half collapsed. But then the pipe above us groaned. I looked up and saw it giving way. A cascade of burning chemicals was about to fall right on top of the woman. I didn't have time to pull her away, so I did the only thing I could. I threw myself over them. I became a human shield. I felt it hit my back. It didn't feel like fire. It felt like cold, heavy lead. And then the pain came. It was a pain so white-hot, so absolute that I blacked out for a second. The chemicals melted through my turnout coat, through my shirt, and into my skin. It splashed up the side of my neck and onto my face. I could hear the man screaming, "Oh my God, he is burning!" I gritted my teeth. I forced myself to stand up even though my nerves were screaming. I grabbed the man by his collar and the woman by her arm, and I marched them down 4 flights of stairs. I didn't let go until we hit the cool air of the street. I saw the paramedics take them. I saw them safe, and then I collapsed. I woke up 3 weeks later in the burn unit. Beatrice was there holding my hand, crying. They told me I was a hero. They told me I had saved the owners of the plant. I stopped polishing the metal. It was gleaming now, bright and sharp under the kitchen light. I reached for the file I had retrieved from the basement the night before, the digitized report. I needed to see it again. I needed to be sure. I put on my reading glasses and scanned the document. My finger traced the lines of text past the technical jargon about combustion points and structural failure. I stopped at the section titled Survivors. Subject 1 male, Robert Sterling, age 30, treated for smoke inhalation and minor burns. Subject 2 female, Claire Sterling, age 28, treated for shock, pregnant. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Pregnant. I did the math. 1995. That was exactly 26 years ago. The woman I saved. The woman I shielded with my own body while my skin melted off. She was pregnant. I leaned back in my chair, a low chuckle escaping my lips. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of irony crashing down on me like a falling wall. Tiffany. That baby was Tiffany. If I had stepped back that day, if I had valued my own skin more than their lives, the chemicals would have killed Claire Sterling instantly. And Tiffany would never have been born. She wouldn't be here to rent the Ritz. She wouldn't be here to call me a monster. She wouldn't be here to ban me from my son's wedding. I saved her life before she even took her first breath. I looked at the metal again. Then I looked at the scar on my hand. The same hand that Tiffany was ashamed to touch. She has no idea, I whispered to the empty room. I closed the file. A sudden surge of power rushed through me. For days I had felt helpless. I had felt like a victim being pushed around by a spoiled child. But now the tables had turned. I held the ultimate card. I thought about calling them right then. I thought about finding Robert Sterling's number and telling him everything over the phone. I could end this charade tonight. But no, that would be too easy. That would be too merciful. Tiffany wanted a show. She wanted me to be a prop in her perfect production. She wanted me to be the invisible man. I stood up and walked to the window. I saw my reflection in the dark glass. The scars were still there, but they didn't look ugly to me anymore. They looked like a receipt for a debt that was about to be collected. I wouldn't say a word, not to Jamal, not to Tiffany. I would go to the rehearsal. I would wear my waiter's mask if I had to. I would sit in the shadows. I would let Tiffany dig her hole deeper and deeper. I would let her insult me, let her lie about me, let her pretend I was trash. Because the moment Robert and Claire Sterling walked into that room, the moment they saw my face, the truth would detonate like a bomb. I put the metal back in its velvet box. But I didn't put it back in the cabinet. I put it in my pocket. I would carry it with me. Tomorrow was the rehearsal. Tomorrow the curtain would rise. I turned off the kitchen light. Darkness swallowed the room, but I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I had walked through fire. A wedding rehearsal was nothing. Sleep well, Tiffany, I thought as I walked down the hall to my bedroom. Enjoy your last night of being the princess. Because the king is coming to reclaim his throne. And he is bringing the fire with him. The Lakeview Grand Hotel is the kind of place where the air conditioning smells like jasmine, and the floors are polished so bright you can see your own soul reflected in them. It sits right on the water, a massive structure of glass and steel designed to make people feel small. I pulled my old Ford truck up to the valet stand. The truck rattled and coughed as I put it in park, a stark contrast to the line of Bentleys and Mercedes that were gleaming under the portico lights. The valet, a kid no older than 19, looked at my truck with a mixture of confusion and disgust. He didn't open my door. He just stood there waiting for me to leave. I stepped out. The evening air was cool coming off the lake. I was wearing the suit Arthur had made for me. The midnight blue wool felt like armor against my skin. It fit perfectly, hugging my shoulders and draping cleanly over my boots. For the first time in 30 years, I felt handsome. I felt like a man who deserved to be there. I adjusted the red pocket square, the color of fire, the color of courage. But before I could even take a step toward the revolving glass doors, a figure emerged from the shadows of the entrance columns. It was Tiffany. She was wearing a white cocktail dress that looked like it cost more than my pension. Her hair was pulled back tight, her face painted to perfection. But her eyes were frantic, darting around the driveway, checking to see if anyone important was watching. When her gaze landed on me, her jaw tightened. She marched down the steps, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. "Stop right there," she hissed. I stopped. "Hello, Tiffany." She didn't return the greeting. She looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my suit for a second, surprised that I didn't look like a beggar, but then she looked at my face and the disgust returned. "What do you think you are doing?" she asked. "I am coming to the rehearsal dinner," I said. "I am the father of the groom, remember?" "Not through the front door, you aren't," she snapped. She looked over her shoulder again, terrified that one of her wealthy guests might arrive and see us talking. "The front entrance is for guests, Thaddeus. For the Sterlings, for people who belong in the brochure, you are strictly back of house." She pointed a manicured finger toward a narrow alleyway on the side of the hotel, a service lane lined with dumpsters and recycling bins. "The service entrance is around the back," she said. "Use the loading dock. There is an elevator that takes you up to the kitchen. You can slip into the ballroom from there." I looked at the alley. Then I looked at her. "You want me to enter through the garbage?" I asked. "I want you to be discreet," she said, "and put this on." She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a blue medical mask. The cheap kind made of paper. She shoved it into my chest. "Wear it," she commanded. "Tell people you have a cold. Tell them you are contagious. I don't care what you tell them, just cover that face up. I don't want anyone losing their appetite before the hors d'oeuvres are served." I took the mask. The paper felt flimsy in my rough hand. I could have crushed it. I could have thrown it in her face and walked through the front door anyway. But I didn't. I had a plan, and a soldier doesn't blow his cover before the ambush is set. "As you wish, Tiffany," I said. I walked away from the lights of the entrance. I walked down the dark alleyway, past the smells of rotting vegetables and stale beer. I entered the hotel through the loading dock, squeezing past crates of champagne and shouting delivery men. I took the service elevator up. It smelled of grease and bleach. This was the world I was relegated to, the invisible world that kept the luxury running. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped out into the bustling kitchen. Chefs were shouting orders, pans were clattering, flames were shooting up from stovetops. I walked through the chaos, my blue suit out of place among the white aprons. A sous chef yelled at me to get out of the way. I pushed through the swinging double doors and finally emerged into the ballroom. It was breathtaking. The ceiling was 3 stories high, adorned with crystal chandeliers that dripped light like diamonds. The walls were draped in silk. Round tables were set with silverware that sparkled under the lights. The room was buzzing with laughter and the clinking of glasses. The elite of Chicago and New York were mingling, holding flutes of champagne, looking effortless and rich. I scanned the room for my seat. I hoped maybe Jamal had fought for me. Maybe he had saved me a spot near the front, near the family. But then I saw the place card. Thaddeus Moore. It was on a small, 2-top table pushed all the way into the back corner, right next to the kitchen doors I had just come through. Every time a waiter walked in or out, the door would swing open and hit the back of my chair. I was as far away from the head table as it was physically possible to be while still being in the room. I sat down. I put the blue mask on, hooking the loops over my ears. It scratched against my scars. I felt like a criminal. I felt like a contagion. I looked across the sea of tables toward the front of the room, and there he was, Jamal. He was standing near the head table, holding a glass of scotch, laughing at something a tall man in a tuxedo was saying. He looked confident. He looked happy. He was playing the part of the successful groom perfectly. He was shaking hands, clapping men on the back, kissing women on the cheek. I watched him for 10 minutes waiting, just waiting for him to look for me, waiting for him to scan the room to see if his father had made it, waiting for him to come over and say hello. Finally, he turned. His eyes swept across the room. He looked past the center tables, past the bar, and his gaze landed on the dark corner where I sat. Our eyes met. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the recognition. He saw me. He saw the blue mask covering the face that had kissed his bruises better when he was a child. He saw the father who had worked double shifts to buy him his first basketball shoes. And then he looked away. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He turned his back to me and started talking to a blonde woman next to him, pretending I didn't exist. That moment hurt more than the fire. The fire had burned my skin, but this burned my soul. I sat there amidst the noise of the party, and suddenly the room fell away. The crystal chandeliers blurred. I was back in the hospital room. 1995. The air smelled of antiseptic and burnt flesh. I was bandaged from my waist to the top of my head. I couldn't move my neck. My hands were wrapped in thick white gauze looking like boxing gloves. Beatrice walked in holding Jamal. He was 3 years old. He was wearing a little red t-shirt with a cartoon bear on it. He looked at me, his eyes wide with fear. He didn't recognize the mummy in the bed. He started to cry, reaching for his mother. "It's okay, baby," Beatrice had whispered, tears streaming down her own face. "It's Daddy. He got hurt helping people. I wanted to hold him so bad." My arms ached with the need to pull him close to tell him I was still his dad, that I was still strong. But I couldn't. My hands were useless. The skin was too raw. If I touched him, I would bleed on him. So I just lay there and watched him cry. I whispered through the bandages, "Hey, champ. It's me. It's Daddy." Beatrice brought him closer, and he eventually stopped crying. He reached out a tiny finger and touched the only part of me that wasn't bandaged, the tip of my right ear. "Daddy ouchie," he had said. "Yeah, Daddy has an ouchie," I had replied, fighting back the pain. "But I will get better. I promise." I did get better. I healed. The bandages came off, but the scars remained. And now, 26 years later, I was still the monster in the room. I looked at my hands resting on the white tablecloth of the hotel table. The same hands that couldn't hold him then were now empty because he didn't want to be held. The sacrifice. That is what everyone called it back then. "You made a great sacrifice, Thaddeus." But sitting there in the corner watching my son laugh with strangers while treating me like a dirty secret, I realized something terrifying. The sacrifice hadn't ended in 1995. It was still happening. I was still burning. I took a sip of water. I forced the memory down. I touched the pocket of my jacket where the metal lay hidden. Jamal had made his choice. He had chosen the mask over the man. He had chosen the lie over the truth. Suddenly the music changed. The chatter died down. The double doors at the main entrance swung open. A hush fell over the crowd. "The Sterlings have arrived," someone whispered at the table next to me. I turned in my chair. Robert and Claire Sterling walked in. They were older now, of course. Robert's hair was silver and Claire moved a bit slower, but they carried themselves with an air of undeniable power. They looked like royalty. Tiffany ran to them, beaming, hugging them, pretending to be the perfect daughter. Jamal straightened his tie, looking nervous, desperate to impress. I watched Robert Sterling closely. I watched the man I had carried on my back. He looked around the room, smiling, shaking hands. He looked like a man who enjoyed his life, a life I had given him. I sat back in the shadows, adjusting my blue mask. "Enjoy the entrance, Robert," I thought. "Enjoy the champagne. Because in about 30 minutes, you are going to meet the ghost of your past." And he is sitting right by the kitchen door. The heavy double doors of the ballroom remained closed to the main guests of honor. A whisper rippled through the room that the Sterlings were delayed. Apparently their private jet had encountered headwinds over the Midwest and they were currently rushing from the airport to the hotel. This delay made Tiffany nervous. I could see it in the way she twisted the diamond engagement ring on her finger and the way she snapped at the event planner who was trying to adjust a flower arrangement. She wanted everything to be perfect, and her parents' lateness was a crack in her flawless porcelain surface. But Tiffany being Tiffany, she decided not to let a little thing like an empty VIP table ruin her moment. She decided that the show must go on, and more importantly, she decided that this was the perfect opportunity to set the narrative before the heavy hitters arrived. She walked to the center of the room. The spotlight hit her, illuminating her white dress until she looked like an angel. But I knew better. Lucifer was an angel too once. She tapped a silver spoon against her champagne flute. The sharp ringing sound cut through the murmurs of the crowd. Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to her. My eyes turned to her too, from my exile in the dark corner by the kitchen swing doors. I adjusted the scratchy blue mask on my face and leaned back, waiting for the performance to begin. "Thank you all for coming." Tiffany began, her voice trembling with a practiced emotion. "I know my parents, Robert and Claire, are running a little late, but we wanted to get started with a few words while the night is still young." She reached out and took Jamal's hand. He stood up next to her. He looked handsome, but he looked hollow. The scotch he had been drinking earlier had put a glaze over his eyes, a shield against the reality of what he was allowing to happen. "I want to talk about Jamal," she said, gazing up at him with adoration that looked so real it almost made me sick. "When I met Jamal, I didn't just meet a man. I met a survivor." I frowned behind my mask. A survivor. That was an interesting choice of words. Many of you know Jamal as the successful architect, the man who is designing the new skyline of Chicago. Tiffany continued. "But what you don't know is the tragedy he has overcome to get here. You see, Jamal is a self-made man in the truest sense of the word." She paused for effect, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I looked at the table next to me where my sister Sarah and her husband Mike were sitting. They had been invited because they were presentable enough, but they had been placed in the back, near me. Sarah looked down at her plate, her hands gripping her napkin. She knew what was coming. We all did. "Jamal lost his parents when he was very young," Tiffany said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He was an orphan. He grew up with nothing. No father to teach him how to shave. No mother to bake him cookies. He had to fight for every scrap of success he has. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps alone in a cold world until he found me. And now he has found a family. The Sterlings are so proud to be the parents he never had." The room let out a collective sigh of sympathy. I saw women dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. I saw men nodding with respect for this brave young orphan standing before them. I sat there frozen. The air left my lungs. Dead. She had just killed me. I wasn't just a distant uncle anymore. I wasn't just the embarrassment to be hidden in the kitchen. I was dead. I was a tragedy to be mined for sympathy points. I looked at my hands, the large, rough hands that had changed Jamal's diapers, the hands that had held the back of his bicycle seat while he learned to ride, the hands that had signed the checks for his college tuition. They were shaking. I wasn't dead. I was right here. I was sitting 50 feet away, breathing the same air, listening to my own eulogy while my son stood there and nodded along. I looked at Jamal. "Say something," I begged him in my mind. "Say it isn't true. Tell them your father is sitting right there. Tell them he worked double shifts at the firehouse to buy you those boots you pulled yourself up by." But Jamal said nothing. He just squeezed Tiffany's hand and looked down at the floor, the shame radiating off him like heat waves. He was letting her bury me alive because it was easier than explaining my face to her rich friends. I looked over at Aunt Sarah. She was crying now, but not because of the speech. She was crying because she was ashamed. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. She wanted to say something, I could see it. But she was afraid. She was afraid of Tiffany. She was afraid of causing a scene, and maybe, just maybe, she was afraid that if she spoke up, they would kick her out too. The power of the Sterling name and the promise of wealth had silenced my entire family. Tiffany continued, unaware of the rage building in the dark corner. "So tonight we don't just celebrate a wedding, we celebrate a rebirth. Jamal is no longer that lonely little boy. He is a Sterling now, and we are going to give him the future he deserves, a future without the shadows of the past." She raised her glass. "To Jamal." "To Jamal," the crowd echoed. I gripped my water glass. My knuckles turned white. The glass was thick, but I squeezed it so hard I felt it groan under the pressure. I wanted to throw it. I wanted to hurl it across the room and smash that spotlight. I wanted to stand up and tear that mask off my face and scream, "I am here, I am his father, and I am the reason he is alive." I started to stand up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. A few heads turned in my direction. The waiter standing near the door glared at me, signaling for me to be quiet. I was halfway out of my seat. My heart was pounding like a sledgehammer. This was it. I was going to end it right now. I was going to walk up to that microphone and tell the truth. But then I stopped. I looked at the double doors at the main entrance. They were still closed. The Sterlings weren't here yet. If I made a scene now, Tiffany would just have security throw me out before her parents arrived. She would spin it. She would say I was a crazy drunk relative crashing the party. She would say I was the crazy uncle she warned everyone about. Without Robert Sterling here to see my face, without the one man who knew the truth of my scars, my outburst would just be noise. It would be exactly what she expected from someone like me. I needed the audience. I needed the only two people in the world who could validate my existence. I slowly sank back into my chair. The anger didn't leave me. It just changed state. It went from a hot explosive fire to a cold, hard block of ice. I released my grip on the glass. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive perfume and betrayal. "You want me to be a ghost, Tiffany?" I thought, staring at her beaming face. "Fine, I will be a ghost. But ghosts have a nasty habit of haunting the people who killed them." The applause died down. The music started up again. Waiters began to circulate with trays of hors d'oeuvres. One of them stopped at my table. He looked at my mask and then at my cheap suit. He didn't offer me a crab cake. He just walked past. I didn't care. I wasn't hungry. I was feeding on something else now. I looked at Jamal again. He was hugging someone, accepting congratulations for being such a brave orphan. He looked relieved. He thought the hard part was over. He thought the lie had been sold and bought. He didn't know that the receipt was still in my pocket. I sat in the darkness and waited. I waited for the doors to open. I waited for the real guests of honor. And as I waited, I realized that the father who had walked into this hotel was gone. Tiffany was right about one thing. That man was dead. The man sitting in the chair now was something else entirely. I was no longer Thaddeus the father. I was Thaddeus the reckoning. And the reckoning was running on a delayed flight from New York. But it was coming. It was definitely coming. The double doors at the main entrance swung open with a heavy, resonant thud that silenced the room instantly. It wasn't just an entrance, it was an arrival. The air in the ballroom seemed to shift, sucking out the oxygen and replacing it with a palpable sense of awe. Standing there, framed by the golden light of the hallway, were Robert and Claire Sterling. They looked like royalty. There was no other word for it. Robert was wearing a tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like it had been woven directly onto his body. His hair was silver thick and swept back, giving him the look of a statesman or a retired general. Beside him, Claire was radiant in a floor-length emerald gown, her neck adorned with pearls that probably cost more than the entire block I lived on. They didn't just walk, they glided. As they stepped into the room, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. People didn't just look at them, they stared with a mix of envy and reverence. I sat in my dark corner by the kitchen doors and felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. I knew these people. Not from magazines, not from the business pages, but from the dark, smoky hell of a dying building. I leaned forward slightly, adjusting the scratchy blue mask that hid my face. My eyes locked onto Robert. He was smiling, waving politely to the guests, but I saw something else. I saw the way he turned his head slightly stiffly to the left. And then as he passed under one of the crystal chandeliers, I saw it. A scar. It was small, faint, a jagged line running from just below his ear down into his collar. To anyone else, it might have looked like a shadow or a trick of the light. But to me, it was a signature. It was the place where the embers had touched him right before I threw my coat over his head. "He carries it," I whispered to myself. "He still carries the mark." Tiffany broke the spell. She let out a squeal of delight that sounded entirely too rehearsed and ran across the dance floor. Her heels clicked sharply on the parquet. "Mommy, Daddy, you made it." She threw her arms around Robert, burying her face in his chest. It was a performance designed to show everyone in the room that she was the beloved princess of this kingdom. Robert hugged her back, his face softening. He looked like a man who loved his daughter deeply, which made my stomach turn. He didn't know. He didn't know that the beautiful girl in his arms had a heart made of ice. "We are so sorry, darling," Robert said, his voice booming and authoritative, the voice of a man used to being listened to. The pilot had to route around a storm front over Ohio. "We wouldn't miss this for the world." Claire kissed Tiffany on the cheek and smoothed her hair. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Just beautiful." Tiffany pulled away, beaming. "Come, you have to meet him properly. You have to meet Jamal." She grabbed Robert's hand and pulled him toward the head table where Jamal was standing. My son looked like he was about to face a firing squad. He was sweating. He wiped his palms on his trousers and straightened his tie for the 10th time. Robert approached him. He didn't look at Jamal's expensive suit or his watch. He looked him in the eye. He looked for the man inside the clothes. "So, this is the young architect who stole my daughter's heart," Robert said, extending a hand. "It is an honor to meet you, sir," Jamal said, his voice cracking slightly. Robert gripped his hand. I saw Jamal wince. The old man was strong. Firm grip. Robert nodded approvingly. "I like that. A man's handshake tells you everything you need to know about his character." I watched from the shadows, my heart pounding against my ribs. That was exactly what I had taught Jamal. Look a man in the eye and squeeze until he knows you are there. Seeing him use my lesson to impress the man I saved was a bitter pill to swallow. Claire stepped forward and hugged Jamal warmly. "Welcome to the family, Jamal. Tiffany has told us so much about your work. She says you are brilliant." "Thank you, ma'am," Jamal stammered. "I try my best." Robert released Jamal's hand and took a step back, looking around the immediate area. He scanned the faces at the head table, then looked at the tables nearby. He seemed confused. He was looking for something he expected to find, something that should have been there by all laws of tradition and decency. He turned back to Jamal. "Well, son," Robert said, his voice warm and inviting. "We have heard all about your accolades and your buildings, but a man doesn't raise himself. Where is your family? I want to meet the people who raised such a fine young man. I want to shake your father's hand." The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I sat up straight. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard the wood creaked. This was it. This was the moment. All Jamal had to do was point. All he had to do was say, "He is right there, sitting in the back because Tiffany made him hide." I held my breath. I willed him to look at me. "Look at me, son. Just look at me." Jamal froze. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Tiffany, panic in his eyes. He was drowning, and he was waiting for her to tell him how to swim. Tiffany stepped in immediately, smoothly sliding her arm through Robert's. "Oh, Daddy," she said, her voice dripping with fake sadness. "We told you. Jamal's situation is complicated." Robert frowned. "Complicated how?" "Every man has a history, Tiffany." "Yes, but not everyone has a happy one," Tiffany said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that I could still hear thanks to the acoustics of the room. "As I mentioned in my speech, Jamal is essentially alone in this world. He lost his parents a long time ago. That is not what she said in the speech. In the speech, she said he was an orphan. Now she was improvising, dancing around the truth." Robert looked concerned. "I am sorry to hear that, son. But surely there is someone, an uncle, a guardian, someone who stood in for them." I leaned forward. "I am here. I am the guardian. I am the father. I am the one who worked 3 jobs. Tiffany squeezed Robert's arm, distracting him. "There was someone," she said, choosing her words like she was picking through broken glass. "A distant relative. An uncle of sorts. But he is not presentable." "Presentable?" Robert asked, his eyebrows narrowing. "What does that mean? Is he ill?" "He is not well." Tiffany lied, her face the picture of concern. "He has had a hard life, Daddy. Drugs, alcohol. He is not someone who can be in a setting like this. He would only embarrass himself and Jamal. We decided it was best for his own dignity if he didn't attend." Dignity. She used the word dignity while stripping me of mine. She painted me as a drunk, as a junkie, as a disgrace, and she did it to protect her perfect image. I felt a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek underneath the mask. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was pure, unadulterated rage. Robert looked at Jamal. "Is this true, son? Is your uncle unstable?" Jamal looked at his shoes. He looked at the floor that was polished to a mirror shine. He could probably see his own cowardice reflected in it. He has had a rough time," Jamal whispered. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, and that silence was the final nail in my coffin. Robert nodded slowly. He looked disappointed. He was a man who believed in family loyalty, but he also understood the ravages of addiction. He had seen it in his own circles. He sighed and patted Jamal on the shoulder. "I understand," Robert said. "It takes a strong man to break the cycle of dysfunction. You should be proud of yourself, Jamal. You have risen above your raising. Risen above my raising." The words hit me like a physical blow. They thought I was the dysfunction. They thought I was the anchor that had tried to drag him down when I had been the wind in his sails his entire life. Robert turned to the room, raising his voice again. "Well then," he said, "since his biological family cannot be here, let it be known that as of tonight, the Sterlings are his family. We look after our own, and we will ensure that Jamal never has to look back at that darkness again." The room erupted in applause. People cheered for the benevolence of the Sterling family. They cheered for Jamal's escape from his imaginary tragic past. I sat there while the applause washed over me like toxic water. I looked at the waiter standing near me. He was clapping too. He looked down at me at the old man in the mask sitting alone at the table by the kitchen, and he shook his head with pity. He probably thought I was the drunk uncle they were talking about. He probably thought they were doing me a favor by letting me sit there. I slowly reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed against the cool metal of the Medal of Valor. You look after your own, Robert, I thought. You really believe that, don't you? I watched as the waiters began to bring out the first course. Lobster bisque. The smell of rich seafood filled the air. Tiffany was laughing, clinging to her mother. Jamal was drinking another scotch, trying to drown the guilt. They thought the scene was over. They thought the narrative was set, the tragic orphan and the benevolent saviors. But they had forgotten one thing. The script they were following was built on a lie, and I was holding the match that would burn the whole thing down. I didn't leave. The agreement I signed said I had to leave after the ceremony, but this was the rehearsal. There were no rules for tonight. I took a sip of water. I waited. I needed Robert to come closer. I needed him to see me, not as the drunk uncle, but as the nightmare he thought he had forgotten. The dinner progressed. Toasts were made. Lies were toasted with expensive champagne. And through it all I remained a statue in the corner, a silent observer, recording every insult, every betrayal, every smile that covered up the rot. I am not leaving, I whispered to the empty chair next to me. I am not going anywhere until the king looks the jester in the eye. The dinner service began with the synchronized precision of a military parade. Waiters in black vests, the same vest I had refused to wear, moved like shadows, placing bowls of steaming lobster bisque in front of the guests. The smell of saffron and cream filled the air, masking the stench of the lies that had just been told. From my exile in the corner, I watched the choreography of wealth, the clinking of silver against china, the polite laughter, the way the candlelight danced on diamonds. It was a beautiful picture, but I knew the canvas was rotten. I watched the waiter assigned to the head table. He was a young man, maybe 20 years old. He was skinny with a nervous energy that reminded me of a rookie firefighter on his first call. His hands were shaking slightly as he balanced a heavy silver tray loaded with 4 bowls of soup. He was trying so hard to be perfect. He was trying to be invisible, just like me. He approached Tiffany. She was deep in conversation with her mother, laughing at something while gesturing wildly with her hands. She didn't notice the boy standing behind her. She didn't care to notice him. To her, he was just a delivery system for her food, not a human being. Just as the boy leaned in to place the bowl, the person sitting next to Tiffany pushed their chair back abruptly. It bumped the waiter's hip. It happened in slow motion. I saw the boy's eyes go wide. I saw the tray tilt. I saw the orange liquid arc through the air like a wave of lava. Splash. The soup landed squarely on the skirt of Tiffany's pristine white cocktail dress. For a split second, there was silence. The kind of silence that happens right after a car crash before the screaming starts. The boy froze, his face draining of all color. He looked terrified. He looked like he knew his life was over. Then the scream pierced the air. "You idiot!" Tiffany jumped up, knocking her chair over. She looked down at the orange stains spreading across the expensive white fabric. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered hatred. It wasn't just anger. It was something darker, something ugly that had been hiding beneath the makeup and the charm. "Look what you did!" she shrieked. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? It costs more than your entire life." The music stopped. The conversation died. Every eye in the room turned to the head table. The young waiter was trembling so hard the empty tray rattled in his hands. "I am so sorry, ma'am," he stammered, tears welling up in his eyes. "It was an accident. The chair, it bumped me." "I don't care about your excuses," Tiffany yelled. She grabbed a napkin and threw it at him. It hit him in the chest. "Get away from me. You are incompetent. This is what happens when you hire these people. They are clumsy. They are stupid. They don't belong in civilized society, these people." The words echoed in the silent ballroom. It was a dog whistle, loud and clear. She wasn't talking about waiters. She was talking about class. She was talking about race. She was talking about anyone she deemed beneath her. Robert Sterling stood up, looking shocked. "Tiffany, calm down," he said, his voice low. "It was an accident. We can get it cleaned." "Don't tell me to calm down, Daddy," she snapped, spinning on him. "You are paying for perfection, not for some street trash to ruin my night. Look at him. He probably did it on purpose. He is probably jealous. That is how they are. They see something beautiful and they want to destroy it. She turned back to the boy who was now sobbing quietly, trying to wipe the soup off the floor with his bare hands. "Get out of my sight," she hissed. "You are fired, and don't think you are getting paid. In fact, I am going to sue you for the dress. I am going to make sure you never work in this city again." That was it. The snap. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart this time, it was my restraint. I had promised myself I would wait. I had promised myself I would play the long game. But I am a firefighter, and when I see someone burning, I don't wait for permission to save them. That boy was burning. He was being consumed by the flames of her cruelty, and absolutely no one was stepping in to help him. Not the guests, not the manager, and certainly not my son. Jamal sat there staring at his drink, pretending he was invisible. He let his fiancée destroy a young man's life over a piece of clothing. I pushed my chair back. The sound of the metal legs scraping against the floor was loud and harsh, like a gunshot in a library. I stood up. I didn't care about the script anymore. I didn't care about the agreement. I didn't care about the mask. I walked out of the shadows. My heavy boots thudded against the carpet. I walked past the shocked guests at the back tables. I walked past the open kitchen doors. I walked straight toward the head table. The waiter saw me coming. He looked up, fear in his eyes, thinking I was another manager coming to yell at him. I reached him and knelt down. My knees cracked, but I didn't feel the pain. I put a hand on his shoulder, a heavy, firm hand. "Stand up, son," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the authority of 40 years of command. The boy looked at me, confused by the blue mask on my face and the kindness in my voice. I said, "Stand up," I repeated, gentler this time. "You are a man. You do not kneel for anyone, especially not for spilling soup." I took the dirty napkin from his hand and tossed it onto the table. I gripped his arm and pulled him to his feet. I stood beside him, a wall of midnight blue wool between him and Tiffany. Tiffany was busy wiping her dress. She saw the movement out of the corner of her eye. She saw someone standing next to the waiter. She looked up, expecting to see security. Instead, she saw me. She saw the cheap blue medical mask. She saw the eyes she hated. She saw the father she had tried to erase. For a second, she looked confused. Then recognition dawned, and her face went from angry to apoplectic. "What are you doing?" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Who let you out of the corner?" I stared at her. I didn't say a word. I just stood there protecting the boy. "Security," she yelled, her voice cracking. "Security. Get in here." Two large men in black suits started to move from the back of the room. "Get this thing out of here," Tiffany shrieked. She was losing control completely. Her carefully crafted image was shattering. "Look at him. He is disgusting. He is scaring the guests." She turned to her parents, eyes wild. "Daddy, do something. This is the drunk uncle I told you about, the junkie. He is crashing the rehearsal. He is ruining everything." Robert Sterling looked at me. He narrowed his eyes, trying to see past the mask, trying to reconcile the tall, proud man standing before him with the description of a broken addict. I looked at Jamal. This was his last chance, the absolute last chance to redeem his soul. "Jamal," I said. My voice was muffled by the mask, but it was clear enough. "Are you going to let her speak to people like this? Are you going to let her throw me out?" Jamal looked up. His eyes met mine. I saw the conflict raging in him. I saw the fear. But the fear won. He looked away. He looked at Tiffany. "Dad, please," he whispered. "Just go back to your seat. Don't make a scene." The betrayal was complete. It wasn't sharp like a knife anymore. It was dull and heavy like a stone sealing a tomb. Tiffany laughed. A cruel, triumphant sound. "See," she mocked. "Even your own nephew doesn't want you here. You are a monster, a freak. Now get out before I have you dragged out." The security guards were closing in. They were 10 feet away. I looked at the waiter. "Go to the kitchen, son," I said softly. "You did nothing wrong." The boy ran. I was alone now, alone in the center of the room, surrounded by enemies. Tiffany was grinning, thinking she had won. She thought she was humiliating me. She thought she was shaming the monster. But she didn't know that monsters don't wear masks to hide their ugliness. Heroes wear masks to protect the innocent. And I was done protecting her. I reached up with my left hand, my scarred hand. I hooked a finger under the loop of the blue medical mask. "You want me to leave, Tiffany?" I asked, my voice rising, filling the cavernous room. "You want security to remove the monster." I pulled the mask off. It fell to the floor, landing softly on the soup-stained carpet. The lights of the chandelier hit my face, the purple ridges of melted skin, the pull of the scar tissue that twisted my lip, the ear that was half gone, the map of pain that I had carried for 3 decades. The gasp from the room was audible. It was a collective intake of breath. Some people turned away. Some covered their mouths. But I didn't flinch. I stood tall. I looked directly at Tiffany. "I am not your drunk uncle," I said, my voice booming now, clear and unhindered. "And I am not a distant relative." I turned my head slowly so the light caught every groove of my scars. Then I looked past Tiffany. I looked past Jamal. I looked directly at the man standing at the head of the table. I looked at Robert Sterling, and I saw the color drain from his face. I saw his glass slip from his fingers. I saw his knees buckle, because he wasn't looking at a monster. He was looking at his savior. "Who allows me in the VIP area?" I asked Tiffany, pointing at my own face. "This face does. This face is the ticket that bought every single thing you have." Tiffany looked confused. She looked from me to her father, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, but too stupid to understand it. "What are you talking about?" she spat. "You are crazy. Daddy, tell him. Tell security to throw him out." But Daddy didn't speak. Daddy couldn't speak. Robert Sterling pushed past his daughter. He pushed past Jamal. He stumbled forward, his eyes locked on my face, tears streaming down his cheeks. He walked right up to me. He was trembling. He reached out a hand, shaking violently, and hovered at inches from my scars. "Is it?" he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "Is it really you?" I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had saved. "Hello, Robert," I said. "It has been a long time." And just like that, the silence in the room changed. It wasn't the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of history being rewritten. The king had returned, and the false princess was about to learn that her castle was built on sand. The 2 security guards were large men, the kind who spent too much time in the gym and not enough time learning how to read people. One of them, a guy with a thick neck and a cheap earpiece, reached out and grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, bordering on painful. He treated me like a vagrant, like a piece of trash that had blown in from the alley. "Sir, you need to come with us," he grunted. "We don't want to use force, but we will, if you make this difficult." I looked at his hand on my sleeve, the sleeve of the midnight blue Italian wool suit that Arthur had sewn with such care. I looked at the boy, the waiter, who was still cowering behind me. Then I looked at Tiffany, who was standing there with a smug, satisfied smirk on her face, waiting for the garbage to be taken out. Something inside me shifted. It was the same feeling I used to get right before kicking down a door into a burning room. It was the adrenaline of absolute clarity. I am 71 years old. My joints ache when it rains. My lungs aren't what they used to be. But I spent 40 years hauling hoses that weighed as much as a man and carrying victims down ladders. I have a strength that doesn't come from gym machines. It comes from survival. "Get your hand off me," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was a low rumble like distant thunder. The guard hesitated. He felt the muscle under the suit. He looked into my eyes and saw something he didn't expect. He saw that I wasn't afraid. I said, "Get your hand off me." I jerked my arm back. A sharp, violent motion. The guard stumbled back a step, surprised by the power of the old man he was trying to bully. I stood up to my full height. I am 6'3". When I straightened my spine, when I really stand tall, I cast a long shadow. I loomed over the guards. I loomed over Tiffany. I loomed over the entire lie they had constructed. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the ice melting in the glasses. Tiffany's smirk faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, look at that!" she scoffed loud and shrill. "The drunk wants to fight. This is exactly what I was talking about. He is violent. He is dangerous. Daddy, are you seeing this?" She pointed a manicured finger at my face, the face still covered by the cheap blue paper mask she had forced me to wear. "Take that ridiculous thing off his face," she commanded the guards. "Let everyone see the junkie eyes. Let everyone see why he doesn't belong here." "You don't have to tell me twice, Tiffany," I said. I reached up. My hand was steady. I hooked my finger under the ear loop of the mask. The paper scratched against my skin. It was the symbol of my shame. It was the muzzle she had put on me to keep me silent. I ripped it off. I didn't just lower it. I tore it away and let it flutter to the floor, landing right next to the soup stain on the carpet. I turned my head. I let the light from the crystal chandeliers hit me full force. I exposed it all. The purple keloid scars that ran like melted wax down the left side of my face. The missing earlobe. The skin that was pulled tight and shiny, giving me a perpetual grimace on one side. The map of pain. The receipt of sacrifice. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was audible. It was physical. People recoiled. Some covered their mouths. A woman at the table near me actually turned her head away, unable to look. I stood there and I let them look. I didn't hide. I didn't flinch. I let the silence stretch out until it was unbearable. Then I spoke. I am not a drunk, I said, my voice booming, filling the cavernous ballroom without a microphone. I am not a distant uncle. And I am certainly not a charity case. I took a step toward Tiffany. She stepped back, her heel catching on her dress. For the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of the truth. My name is Thaddeus Moore, I announced, looking around the room, making eye contact with the people who had been pitying Jamal moments ago. I am a retired captain of the Chicago Fire Department. I served this city for 40 years. I have pulled people out of wrecks you couldn't imagine in your worst nightmares. I turned back to Tiffany. And I am the father of the groom. I pointed a finger at Jamal. He was standing there pale as a ghost, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him. That man is my son. I raised him alone. I taught him how to walk. I taught him how to read. And clearly, I failed to teach him how to be a man, because he is standing there, letting you treat me like a dog. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the receipt for the check I had written. I held it up. And as for not belonging here, let's get one thing clear. You see these chandeliers. You see this dance floor. You see the champagne you are drinking. I took another step forward. I paid for it. $50,000. That is my money. That is the settlement money from the fire that took my face. So technically, Tiffany, you are standing on my floor. You are drinking my wine, and you are insulting me in my house. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. The whispers started immediately. His father. He paid for it, but she said he was an orphan. Tiffany looked around frantically. She saw she was losing the crowd. She saw the guests looking at her with confusion and judgment. She needed to regain control. She needed to make me the villain again. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She went low. She laughed. It was a forced, high-pitched sound that grated on the nerves. "Oh, wow," she said, clapping her hands mockingly. A round of applause for the performance. "So you are his dad. Congratulations." She walked up to me, wrinkling her nose as if I smelled like sewage. "But look at you. Just look at you. Jamal, is this really your father? Because honestly, he looks like a monster." She turned to the crowd, gesturing at my face like I was a circus exhibit. "I mean, can you blame me for hiding him? Look at those scars. It is disgusting. It makes me want to vomit. How can anyone eat dinner looking at that? It is repulsive. It is nightmare fuel." She looked at Jamal, expecting him to agree, expecting him to validate her cruelty. "Tell him, Jamal," she urged. "Tell him he is embarrassing us. Tell him he looks like something that crawled out of a grave." Jamal looked at me. He looked at the scars. I saw the shame in his eyes. But it wasn't shame for his actions. It was shame for my appearance. He agreed with her. Deep down, he agreed with her. "Dad," he whispered, "please, put the mask back on." That broke me. That finally severed the last thread of hope I had for him. My own son wanted me to hide. But before I could answer, before I could tell him that he was no longer my son, a sound cut through the tension. Smash. It was the sound of fine crystal hitting a hard floor. Everyone turned. Robert Sterling was standing at the head of the table. His hand was frozen in mid-air, still holding the shape of the wine glass he had just dropped. Red wine was spreading across the white tablecloth and dripping onto the floor, looking like a pool of fresh blood. But Robert didn't notice the wine. He didn't notice the mess. He was staring at me. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked onto the left side of my face. His mouth was slightly open. His face had gone completely white, drained of all blood. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. Daddy, Tiffany asked, annoyed by the interruption. "What is wrong?" "Don't worry, we will get it cleaned up. Just tell security to get this freak out of here so we can continue." Robert didn't hear her. He didn't hear anything. He started to move. He didn't walk around the table. He shoved past it, knocking a chair over in his haste. He stumbled a bit, regaining his balance, and then he started walking toward me. His movement was trance-like. He walked right past his wife. He walked right past Jamal. He walked right past Tiffany, who was trying to grab his arm. "Daddy, stop! Where are you going?" she demanded. Robert pushed her hand away without even looking at her. He kept his eyes fixed on me, fixed on the scars. The room fell into a deathly silence again. Everyone watched as the billionaire Robert Sterling walked across the ballroom floor toward the disfigured old man who had just claimed to be the financier of the wedding. I stood my ground. I watched him come. I saw the recognition in his eyes. I saw the memories flooding back. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. He was trembling. His hands were shaking by his sides. He looked at my ear. He looked at the way the skin pulled at my jaw. He looked at the specific pattern of the burn, the way it wrapped around my neck. He knew that pattern. He had seen it happen. He had smelled the burning flesh 30 years ago. He raised a shaking hand. He reached out as if he wanted to touch my face, but he was afraid I might be an illusion. "Is it?" he whispered. His voice was barely a breath, a broken sound that carried more emotion than all of Tiffany's speeches combined. "Is it really you?" Tiffany stomped her foot. "Daddy, stop it. You don't know him. He is nobody. He is just Jamal's ugly father." Robert spun around. The speed and violence of the movement made everyone jump. "Shut up," he roared. The sound of his voice was terrifying. It wasn't the polite voice of a society man. It was the voice of a primal rage. Tiffany froze, her mouth hanging open. She had never heard her father yell at her in her entire life. Robert turned back to me. Tears were streaming down his face now, unashamed. "I have looked for you," he said, his voice cracking. "For 30 years I have looked for you. I hired detectives. I checked every hospital. They told me you disappeared. They told me the firefighter who saved us didn't leave a name. I didn't want a reward, Robert," I said softly. "I just did my job." "Job?" Robert choked out a sob. "You call that a job? You gave me my life. You gave me my wife." He fell to his knees. Right there in the middle of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, Robert Sterling, the billionaire, the titan of industry, fell to his knees in front of me. He grabbed my hand, my scarred, rough hand, and he pressed his forehead against it, weeping uncontrollably. "Thank you," he sobbed. "Thank you. Thank you." The sound of his weeping filled the room. Tiffany stood there horrified. Jamal stood there confused. And I stood there, the man with the monster face, looking down at the man whose life I had saved, feeling the weight of the truth finally crushing the lies. The mask was off, and the real faces were finally being revealed. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room, leaving only the tension of a stretched rubber band waiting to snap. I stood there, my scarred face exposed to the lights, and watched as Robert Sterling, the man who owned half the city, stumbled toward me like a pilgrim reaching a shrine. He pushed past Tiffany. He didn't just walk around her, he physically shoved her aside. It wasn't a violent shove, but it was dismissive. It was the action of a man who was sweeping away a cobweb to get to something precious. Tiffany stumbled back, her high heels catching on the carpet, her face a mask of shock. She had never been pushed aside in her life, especially not by her father. "Daddy," she gasped, grabbing his arm. "What are you doing?" "That is the man who ruined my dress. That is the crazy person." Robert didn't even hear her. He shook her hand off his arm as if it were a bothersome fly. He kept his eyes locked on me. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving under his tuxedo. Claire was right behind him. She was moving faster than I had ever seen a woman her age move. She abandoned her purse on the table. She abandoned her dignity. She ran to catch up with her husband, her eyes streaming with tears that ruined her makeup, but she didn't care. They stopped 2 feet in front of me. Up close, I could see the age in their faces. I could see the lines that 30 years of life had etched there. But in their eyes, I saw the young couple from the elevator shaft. I saw the terror and the gratitude frozen in time. Claire reached out first. Her hands were manicured and adorned with diamond rings, but they were shaking uncontrollably. She raised them toward my face. She hesitated for a split second, not out of disgust, but out of reverence. She looked at the purple ridges of skin that melted down my cheek. To everyone else in that room, those scars were a horror show. To her, they were a holy text. She didn't touch the skin. She hovered her fingers just inches away, tracing the air in front of the scars, as if she could feel the heat radiating from memory. The eyes, she whispered, her voice trembling so hard it broke on every syllable. "Robert, Look at the eyes. I told you I would never forget them. She looked deep into my pupils. It is him, she sobbed. It is the firefighter, number 42. I saw the number on his helmet before he gave it to you. I saw the number 42. Robert stood beside her. He wasn't crying anymore. He was staring at me with the intensity that felt like a physical weight. He was looking at the way my left ear was misshapen. He was looking at the way my jawline was pulled tight. He was putting the puzzle pieces together. The nightmare he had lived with for 3 decades was finally taking physical form in front of him. I looked back at him. I saw the faint scar on his neck. "Hello, Robert," I said. My voice was soft, but in the dead silence of the room it carried to every corner. Robert let out a strangled sound. He covered his mouth with his hand. I smiled. It was a crooked smile, the only kind I could make, but it was genuine. "It has been a long time, kid. How is the neck? Does it still hurt when it rains?" That was the key. That was the password. When I had carried him out of the fire, he had a piece of hot debris searing into his neck. I had held a wet rag against it with one hand while dragging him with the other, screaming at him to stay awake. No one else knew that. No one else could know that. Robert's knees gave way. He didn't fall to the floor, but he slumped forward, grabbing my shoulders to hold himself up. He gripped my jacket, the wool of the suit Arthur had made, and he buried his face in my chest. "My God," he wept. "My God, Thaddeus. We thought you were dead. We thought the building came down on you." "I didn't die, Robert," I said, patting his back with my scarred hand. "I just got a little crispy, that is all." Claire threw her arms around both of us. She hugged me tight, pressing her cheek against the rough wool of my suit. She didn't care about the soup stain on the carpet. She didn't care about the hundreds of people watching. She just held on to the man who had given her a future. For a moment, the three of us stood there in a huddle of grief and relief, the billionaire couple and the scarred old firefighter. It was a tableau of pure humanity in a room filled with artificial perfection. But the moment couldn't last, because evil doesn't like to be ignored. Tiffany had been standing there watching this reunion with growing horror. But it wasn't the horror of realization. It was the horror of losing the spotlight. She saw her parents, the Sterlings, hugging a monster. She saw her wedding narrative crumbling. She saw the guests whispering and pointing. She couldn't take it. She snapped. She marched up to us, her face twisted into a snarl that made my scars look beautiful by comparison. She grabbed her father's shoulder and yanked him back. "Get off him!" she shrieked. "Get off him right now! Have you both lost your minds?" Robert turned slowly. He looked at his daughter as if he was seeing a stranger. His eyes were red, his face wet with tears, but his expression was bewildered. Tiffany Claire said, wiping her eyes, "You don't understand. This is him. This is the man who saved us." "I don't care who he is," Tiffany yelled, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "Look at him. He is a beggar. He is a freak. He probably looked you up on the internet and came here to scam you." She pointed a finger in my face. Her nail was long and sharp. "He is lying," she spat. "He is just a dirty old man trying to get money. Look at his clothes. Look at his face. Do you really think someone like this is a hero? He belongs in a cage, not at my rehearsal dinner." She turned to the crowd, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Security, get him out. I don't care if my parents are confused. I am the bride. Get this filth out of my sight. He is ruining my wedding." She turned back to me, her eyes full of venom. "You are pathetic," she hissed. "You think you can just walk in here and pretend to be somebody. You are nothing. You are trash. You are an ugly old beggar who probably burned his own face off being a drunk." The insult hung in the air, heavy, toxic, unforgivable. I saw Robert's face change. The bewilderment vanished. The sadness evaporated. In its place came a cold, hard fury, the kind of fury that only a parent can feel when they realize they have raised a monster. He straightened up. He wiped his face with a silk handkerchief. He looked at Tiffany. He looked at her white dress. He looked at her diamond ring. He looked at the sneer on her lips. And then he moved. It was fast, too fast for an old man. It was the movement of a father who needed to correct a mistake that had gone on for 26 years. Smack. The sound of his open palm hitting Tiffany's cheek was louder than the crystal breaking earlier. It was a sharp cracking sound that echoed off the high ceilings. Tiffany's head snapped to the side. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek. The room gasped. Jamal took a step forward but stopped. Silence. Absolute terrifying silence. Tiffany looked at her father, her eyes wide with shock. He had never touched her in anger in her entire life. "Daddy," she whimpered. "Shut up," Robert said. His voice was low, but it was shaking with rage. "Do not speak. Do not say another word." He took a step toward her, forcing her to back away. "You call him a beggar," Robert said, pointing at me. "You call him filth. You call him ugly." He grabbed Tiffany's arm and dragged her toward me. She tried to pull away, but he held her fast. He forced her to look at me. "Look at him," Robert roared. "Look at his face." Tiffany looked terrified. She looked at my scars and then back at her father. "Do you know why he looks like that?" Robert asked, his voice breaking. "Do you know where he got those burns? He got them standing over your mother while she was pregnant with you." Tiffany went still. Her eyes flicked to my face, then back to her father. What she whispered. "He stood in a chemical fire," Robert said, tears flowing again. "He stood there, and he let his skin melt off his body to shield us. He took the fire so we didn't have to. He took the fire so you could be born." Robert released her arm, shoving her away from him. "Every breath you take is a gift from this man," he said. "Every dollar you spend, every dress you wear, every moment of this privileged life you have lived, it was all paid for with his skin, with his pain. And you stand here and you call him a beggar." Robert looked around the room, addressing the guests, addressing the world. "She called him a monster," he said, his voice dripping with disgust. "But I look around this room and I see only one monster, and she is wearing a white dress." Tiffany stood there holding her cheek. Her face was red, not just from the slap, but from the sudden crushing weight of the truth. She looked at Jamal. She looked for support. But Jamal wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. He was looking at his father. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking with shame. He was looking with horror at what he had done. I stood tall. I adjusted my cuffs. I didn't need to say anything. The slap had said it all. The truth was out. The fire had been brought into the light, and it was burning down the house of lies that Tiffany had built. Robert turned to me. He took my hand again. "I am so sorry, Thaddeus," he whispered. "I am so sorry for my daughter. I failed her. I gave her everything except the one thing you have in abundance: character." "It is not your fault, Robert," I said quietly. "We can't save everyone, not even the ones we love." But as I looked at Tiffany, weeping tears of self-pity in the center of the ballroom, I knew one thing for sure. The reckoning wasn't over. It was just beginning. And the check for $50,000 was about to bounce in a way she never expected. The sound of the slap still hung in the air, a phantom echo that seemed to vibrate against the crystal glasses. Tiffany stood frozen, her hand cupping her cheek, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and humiliation. But Robert Sterling did not look at her. He did not look at his wife, who was still clinging to my arm, weeping softly. He walked to the small stage where the microphone stood, the same microphone Tiffany had used to lie about my life just an hour ago. He tapped it once. The sound thumped through the speakers, commanding absolute attention. "Please sit down, everyone," Robert said. His voice was hoarse, but it carried the weight of a man who was done playing games. Nobody moved. The waiters stood still with their trays. The guests stood by their chairs. The tension was too thick for anyone to relax. "I said, sit down," Robert commanded louder this time. Slowly, the guests sank into their chairs. They were a captive audience now. They knew that the rehearsal was over and the reckoning had begun. Robert looked at me. He nodded a gesture of profound respect. Then he looked out at the sea of faces. 30 years ago on October 12th, 1995, I died. Robert began. The room was deathly quiet. I died in a hallway on the 4th floor of the Sterling chemical plant. My wife Claire died with me. We were trapped. The fire doors had locked. The elevator shaft was a chimney of black smoke. The heat was so intense it was melting the buttons on my suit jacket. We were huddled in a corner, praying, holding each other, waiting for the end. We knew it was coming. We could hear the pipes groaning above us. Robert paused. He took a deep breath, his eyes unfocused, as if he was seeing the flames right there in the ballroom. Above our heads, a main transport line for industrial acid burst. It didn't just leak. It exploded. A curtain of boiling chemical sludge was coming down right on top of us. It would have dissolved us in seconds. It would have left nothing but bones. He pointed a shaking finger at me. But then a door kicked open, and out of the smoke came a man. He didn't look like a man. He looked like a giant in yellow gear. He saw us. He saw the pipe bursting. He didn't have time to get us out. He didn't have time to run. Robert's voice broke. He had to stop to compose himself. So he did the only thing he could. He threw us into the corner and he covered us. He used his own body as a shield. He turned his back to the acid and he hunched over us. I stood in the back listening to his words. I remembered the weight of that acid. It felt like 1,000 wasps stinging at once. I remembered the smell of my own turnout gear dissolving. I lay there, under him. Robert continued, tears streaming down his face again, and I heard him screaming, not a scream of fear, a scream of agony. I could hear the chemicals eating through his coat. I could hear the sizzling sound of liquid hitting skin, but he didn't move. He didn't flinch. He stayed there, covering my wife, covering my unborn child until the pipe ran dry. Robert gripped the microphone stand until his knuckles turned white. He took it all. He took every drop of that fire so that I could stand here today. He took the scars so that my wife could have a face. He took the pain so that my daughter could be born. Robert looked at Tiffany, who was trembling near the head table. And when the fire was out, when he had dragged us down 4 flights of stairs to safety, he disappeared. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. I asked for the man who saved me. I wanted to give him half my company. I wanted to give him the world. But he was gone. He turned to look at me again. I hired investigators. I spent thousands trying to find him. But the report said he had checked himself out of the burn unit early. It said he refused the city's reward money. It said he didn't want to be a charity case. He didn't want to be pitied. He went back to his life. He went back to raising his son alone, and he never asked me for a dime. I lowered my head. That was the truth. I didn't want his money then. I wanted to be a father, not a victim. I wanted Jamal to see a man who worked for a living, not a man who lived off a settlement check. Robert stepped off the stage. He walked slowly toward the head table where Jamal was standing. Jamal looked small. He looked like a child wearing his father's suit. He was shaking his hands, gripping the back of a chair for support. Robert stopped in front of him. The sadness in Robert's eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, hard judgment. "You knew," Robert said. His voice was low, barely a whisper, but it was terrifying. Jamal flinched. You knew," Robert repeated louder. "You knew your father was a hero. You grew up seeing those burns every single day. You knew he got them saving lives. You knew he was a captain. You knew he was a man of honor." Jamal looked down at the floor, tears dripping from his nose. "Yes," he whispered. "I knew." And yet Robert said, his voice rising with every word. "And yet you stood here tonight and you let my daughter call him a monster. You let her call him a beggar. You let her put a mask on him like he was a dog." Robert grabbed Jamal by the lapels of his jacket. The expensive jacket that I had paid for. "Why?" Robert roared, shaking him. "Why did you do it? Was it for the money? Was it for the venue? Did you sell your father's dignity for a deposit on a ballroom?" Jamal sobbed. His legs gave out. He crumbled. Robert let him go, and Jamal fell to his knees on the polished floor. I just wanted to fit in," Jamal cried, his voice high and pathetic. "I wanted to be like you. I wanted to be a Sterling. I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the truck. I was ashamed of the house. I didn't want people to look at him and feel sorry for me." The confession hung in the air, naked and ugly. Robert looked down at him with pure disgust. "You wanted to be a Sterling," Robert said, spitting the words out. "You think being a Sterling is about money. You think it is about the Ritz and the Porsche and the white dress. You fool. Being a Sterling is about honor. It is about loyalty. And you have none." Robert turned to the guests. "This wedding is over," he announced. "Go home." Then he looked at Tiffany. She was sobbing now, realizing that her fairy tale had turned into a horror movie. "And you," Robert said to his daughter, "you called him a monster. You called the man who gave you life a monster. You are going to apologize. You are going to get on your knees next to your coward of a fiancé, and you are going to beg that man for forgiveness." Tiffany shook her head, backing away. I can't. He is..." Robert didn't let her finish. He turned his back on her. He walked over to me. He stood in front of me again. "Thaddeus," he said, "I cannot undo the disrespect my family has shown you tonight. I cannot undo the pain we caused, but I can make sure it never happens again." I looked at Robert. I looked at the man I saved. "It is not your fault, Robert," I said. "We raise our children, but we cannot live their lives for them." I looked past him at Jamal. My son was on his knees weeping into his hands. He looked broken. He looked like he wanted me to come over and pick him up like I used to when he scraped his knee. He wanted me to tell him it was okay. He wanted me to fix it. But I didn't move. I stood there in my midnight blue suit, my red pocket square bright against my chest. Jamal looked up at me. His eyes were red and swollen. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, please, I am sorry. I was so stupid. Please, Dad." He reached a hand out toward me. I looked at that hand. I remembered holding it when it was tiny. I remembered holding it when we walked to his first day of school. I remembered holding it when we buried his mother. But tonight, that hand had taken a check and tried to erase my existence. I took a step back. The distance between us was only 10 feet, but in that moment it became an ocean. It became a canyon that no apology could bridge. "You are not sorry you hurt me, Jamal," I said, my voice steady and calm. "You are sorry you got caught. You are sorry the check bounced." "Dad, don't say that," Jamal wailed. I turned to Robert. "I think I will go now," I said. "The air in here is a little too thin for me." Robert nodded. "I will drive you," he said. "Or my driver will. Anywhere you want to go." "No," I said. "I have my truck. It might be old, but it is paid for. And it is honest." I started to walk toward the exit. I walked past the table where I had sat in the dark. I walked past the soup stain on the floor. I walked past Tiffany, who was staring at the ground, unable to look at me. "Dad, wait," Jamal screamed, scrambling to his feet. "Don't leave me here." I stopped at the double doors. I didn't turn around. "You are a sterling now, Jamal," I said without looking back. "You got what you wanted. You are a self-made man." I pushed the doors open and walked out into the cool night air. Behind me, I heard the sound of my son crying, but for the first time in his life, I didn't turn back to comfort him. I had carried him long enough. It was time for him to walk on his own, even if he had to crawl first. The truth was out. The fire was over. And as I walked toward my rusted Ford truck, I felt lighter than I had in 30 years. The weight of the secret was gone. The weight of the mask was gone. I was Thaddeus Moore. And I was finally free. Tiffany stood in the center of the ballroom holding her stinging cheek, looking at her father with eyes that were wide with disbelief. She had been slapped, she had been yelled at, and she had been embarrassed in front of the city's elite. But as I watched her, I realized she still didn't get it. She didn't understand the gravity of what had just happened. To her, this was just a scene, a dramatic interruption to her perfect night. She thought she could fix it. She thought she could cry a little, apologize a little, and then the music would start again and the champagne would flow. She was a child who had broken a vase and expected her parents to just sweep up the glass and buy her a new one. But Daddy, she whined, her voice taking on that shrill, petulant tone that had grated on my nerves for weeks. That was 30 years ago. It is the past. Why does it matter now? This is my wedding. This is my night. You can't ruin my life just because of some old war story. She gestured around to the room, her hands shaking. "Look at all these people. Look at the flowers. Look at the cake. We have spent months planning this. You can't just cancel it. Think about the embarrassment. Think about what people will say on Instagram." She looked at me with pure venom. "And all for him. For a stranger. So he saved you once. Fine. Give him a medal. Give him some money. But don't let him destroy my happiness. He doesn't belong here, Daddy. He is ruining the aesthetic." Robert stared at his daughter. He looked at her as if he was seeing a creature he didn't recognize. The anger in his face began to cool, hardening into something far more dangerous. It was a cold, absolute resolve. He realized in that moment that his money hadn't just spoiled her, it had rotted her soul. He realized that by giving her everything, he had taken away her humanity. He didn't scream at her this time, he didn't raise his hand. He simply reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it and dialed a number. He put the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Tiffany's face. Edward Roberts said into the phone, his voice calm and terrifyingly businesslike. "It is, Robert. I need you to execute the contingency plan regarding Tiffany's trust fund." Tiffany froze. Her mouth fell open. The blood drained from her face faster than it had when he slapped her. "Daddy, what are you doing?" she whispered. "Yes," Robert continued into the phone, ignoring her. "Effective immediately. I want all credit cards associated with the Sterling family account canceled. The black card, the platinum card, all of them. Mark them as stolen if you have to. Just shut them down. No, Tiffany screamed. She lunged forward trying to grab the phone, but Robert stepped back, holding it out of reach. Daddy, stop. You can't do this. I also want you to draft a new will, Robert said. Remove Tiffany Sterling as a beneficiary. The entire estate, the properties in the Hamptons, the apartment in Manhattan, the portfolio, everything. Redirect 100% of her share to the Sterling Foundation for Burn Victims. He listened for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I am sure. She is 26 years old, Edward. It is time she learned how the real world works, and cancel the check for the Ritz-Carlton. This event is over. If they want to sue, let them sue. He hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Tiffany stood there trembling. Her hands were clenched at her sides. She looked like she was having a panic attack. Her entire identity, her power, her confidence, it was all wrapped up in that plastic card her father had just deactivated. Without his money, she was just a mean girl in a stained dress. You can't do this, she sobbed. How am I supposed to live? I have bills, I have leases, I have a lifestyle. Then you better get a job, Robert said, cold as ice. You have a degree that I paid $200,000 for. Use it. Flip burgers. Walk dogs. I don't care. But from this moment on, you are on your own. You wanted to be an adult Tiffany. You wanted to run the show. Well, welcome to adulthood. In the adult world, you pay for your own mistakes. He turned away from her, dismissing her completely. Tiffany spun around looking for an ally. She looked at her mother. Claire just shook her head, turning her face away, refusing to look at the daughter who had called her savior a monster. Tiffany looked at the guests, but they were all looking down at their tables, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. Finally, she looked at Jamal. Do something, she shrieked at him. Don't just stand there, you coward. Fix this. Tell him. Tell him we need the money. Jamal stood there paralyzed. He was watching his golden ticket dissolve in front of his eyes. He had sold his soul to marry into this family, and now the family was cutting him loose. I watched it all from my spot near the door. I watched the house of cards collapse. It was satisfying, yes, but it was also tragic. It was the tragedy of a life built on nothing but greed. Then my eyes caught something on the floor. Lying on the carpet near the soup stain, right where Tiffany had been standing, was a slip of paper. It was the check. The check for $50,000 that I had written just yesterday. Jamal must have given it to Tiffany for safekeeping, and she must have dropped it when Robert slapped her. It lay there face up, crisp and white against the dark red pattern of the rug. $50,000. That money meant nothing to Robert Sterling. It was pocket change to him. But to me, it was everything. It was the settlement from the city. It was the price tag they had put on my face. Every dollar represented a night of pain, a surgery, a moment of shame when I looked in the mirror. I walked forward. The crowd parted for me again. I moved slowly, my boots heavy on the floor. I walked right into the center of the drama. I stopped in front of the check. Tiffany saw me. She looked at the check, then she looked at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of greed in her eyes. Even now, even as her world was ending, she was thinking about that money. She made a move as if to dive for it. But I was faster. I bent down. My knees cracked, but I didn't care. I picked up the check. My scarred fingers brushed against the paper. I stood up and held it. Jamal watched me. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at the check in my hand, and I saw the desperation in his face. He knew that without the sterling fortune, this $50,000 was the only thing he had left. It was his safety net. Dad, he whispered. I looked at him. I looked at the son who had asked me to hide. I held the check up so everyone could see it. Do you know what this is? I asked, my voice echoing in the silent room. Tiffany thinks this is just paper, I said, looking at her. She thinks it is just a number in a bank account. She thinks it is a deposit for a party. I turned the check over in my hands. But it isn't paper. This is skin. I pointed to my face. This money is the compensation I got for having my face melted off. This money is the payment for 3 months in a burn unit screaming while they scrubbed dead tissue off my body. This money is for the 30 years I spent alone because I was too ugly to date. I looked at Jamal. I saved this money for you, son. I saved it so you wouldn't have to struggle like I did. I drove a truck that was falling apart so you could have this. I wore clothes from the Goodwill so you could have this. I ate canned soup so you could have this. Jamal sobbed quietly, his head bowed. I thought I was saving it for your future, I said, my voice hardening. But I was wrong. I was saving it for a man who doesn't exist. The son I thought I had, the son I raised, he wouldn't have let me sit in the dark. He wouldn't have let a woman call me a monster. I took the check in both hands. This money is blood and flesh. I said louder now, my voice filling the room. It is my blood. It is my flesh. And I will be damned if I let it be used to buy champagne for people who spit on me. I gripped the paper tight. I will not pay for my own humiliation, I roared. Rip! The sound of the paper tearing was sharp and final. I tore it down the middle. Tiffany let out a gasp as if I had physically slapped her. No, she whispered. Rip. I tore the halves into quarters. Rip. I tore the quarters into eighths. I kept tearing until the $50,000 was nothing but a handful of white confetti. I walked over to Tiffany. She stood there trembling, stripped of her inheritance, stripped of her dignity, and now stripped of her last hope. I opened my hand. The pieces of the check fluttered down, landing on her stained white dress, landing on her expensive shoes. Here is your deposit, Tiffany, I said, cold and hard. Keep the change. I turned to Jamal. He was staring at the shredded paper on the floor as if it were his own life that had been torn apart. You wanted a wedding, I said to him. Well, you got a show. I hope it was worth it. I dusted my hands off, cleaning them of the dirty money. I looked at Robert. He was watching me with a look of profound sorrow and respect. He nodded slowly, understanding exactly what I had done. I adjusted my jacket. The midnight blue wool felt lighter now. The burden was gone. I didn't look back at them. I didn't look back at the weeping bride or the broken groom. I turned and walked toward the door, my head held high, my scars catching the light. I was Thaddeus Moore. I was poor again, but I was rich in the only currency that mattered. I had my self-respect, and no amount of money could ever buy that back once you sold it. The ballroom doors swung shut behind me, but they couldn't block out the sounds of a life collapsing. I could still hear the murmur of the crowd, the low buzz of scandal that spreads faster than fire. Inside that room, the party was over. The guest people who had come to be seen and to judge were now rushing for the exits. They clutched their fur coats and checked their phones, eager to distance themselves from the disaster. I heard snippets of their conversations as I walked down the long carpeted hallway toward the main entrance. Did you hear what her father said? Called her a monster. And the groom. Just stood there, pathetic. I never liked her anyway. They were vultures picking at the carcass of Tiffany's reputation. 10 minutes ago they were toasting her beauty. Now they were feasting on her ruin. It didn't bring me joy to hear it. It just confirmed what I had known all along. These people had no loyalty. They flowed wherever the money and power went. And tonight, the power had walked out the door with the man in the blue suit. I pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped out into the night. The air was sharp and cold, a stark contrast to the stifling, perfume-scented atmosphere inside. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the smell of the lake and the city. It smelled like freedom. I walked past the valet stand. The young kid who had looked at my truck with disgust earlier was now looking at me with wide eyes. He had heard the rumors. He knew that the man with the scars was the one who had shut the whole show down. He scrambled to get my keys, but I waved him off. I wasn't ready to drive yet. I needed to walk. I needed to let the adrenaline fade from my blood. I walked toward the dark corner of the parking lot where my rusted Ford was parked. It sat there alone under a flickering street lamp, a piece of honest machinery in a sea of leased luxury. Dad. Dad, wait. The voice was desperate, breathless. I knew it better than my own heartbeat. It was the voice that used to call for me when he had a nightmare. It was the voice that asked me to teach him how to tie a tie. I didn't stop walking. My boots crunched on the gravel. Dad, please. You can't just leave like this. I heard his footsteps running up behind me, fast, frantic. He grabbed my arm. I stopped. I didn't pull away this time, but I didn't turn around either. I just stood there looking at the dent in the tailgate of my truck. Jamal ran around to face me. He was a mess. His tie was crooked, his hair was disheveled, and his face was wet with tears and sweat. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down and realized he was holding the matches. I am sorry, he gasped, his chest heaving. Dad, I am so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to believe me. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had sacrificed everything for. And for the first time in his life, I didn't see my boy. I saw a stranger. I saw a man I didn't respect. You didn't mean for what to happen, Jamal, I asked, my voice calm and cold. You didn't mean for me to stand up for myself. Or you didn't mean to get caught. No, Dad, it is not like that. Jamal pleaded, grabbing my hands. His hands were shaking. I was confused. Tiffany, she is so persuasive. She told me it was the only way. She said we had to impress her parents. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted them to accept me. And what about me, Jamal, I asked. Did you want me to accept you? Or was my acceptance not worth as much as an invite to the Hamptons? Jamal flinched as if I had hit him. I love you, Dad, he sobbed. You know I love you. I was weak. I made a mistake. Please give me a chance to fix it. We can go back inside. We can talk to Robert. You can tell him to give me another chance. He listens to you. He worships you. I pulled my hands away from his grip. He was still doing it. Even now, standing in the wreckage, he was looking for an angle. He wanted me to use my new status as a hero to get him back into the good graces of the bank account. You still don't get it, do you? I said, shaking my head slowly. Get what, Dad? I lost everything. She is gone. The money is gone. You didn't lose anything, Jamal, I said, cutting him off. Because you never had it. It wasn't yours. It was a costume you were wearing. I took a step closer to him, forcing him to look at the scars he had tried to hide. You are apologizing because the check bounced, I said. You are crying because the easy road just disappeared. But you are not crying for me. You are not crying for the fact that you looked your father in the eye and told him to wear a mask. I was trying to protect you, Jamal stammered. I didn't want people to stare. Liar, I said. The word hung in the cold air between us. You were protecting yourself. You were ashamed. Not of me, but of where you came from. You were ashamed of the truck. You were ashamed of the neighborhood. You were ashamed that your father works with his hands and carries the marks of his labor on his face. Jamal lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. You fell in love with a woman who hates who you are, I continued. And instead of defending your blood, you decided to drain it. You decided to become a paper doll cut out to fit into her little dollhouse. Dad, please, Jamal whispered. I can change. I can be better. Just don't look at me like that. Like you hate me. I don't hate you, son, I said. My voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. Hate takes energy, and I don't have any energy left for this lie. I am just disappointed, and that is worse than hate. I turned toward my truck. I put my hand on the cold metal of the door handle. Where are you going? Jamal asked, panic rising in his voice again. Can I come with you? Can I come home? I stopped. I looked at the empty passenger seat. The seat where he used to sit when he was a kid, his feet barely touching the floorboard, telling me about his day at school. No, I said. Jamal froze. What? You can't come home, Jamal, I said. Not tonight. Not to that house. But where will I go? He asked, his voice trembling like a lost child. I gave up my apartment. I moved everything into Tiffany's place. She won't let me back in. I have nowhere to go. Then you better start walking, I said. I turned to face him one last time. This is the lesson, Jamal. This is the one I shielded you from your whole life. Actions have consequences. You wanted to be a man of the world. You wanted to be independent. Well, here it is. The world is cold and it is hard and nobody cares if you are cold. But Dad, you are not wrong for loving her, Jamal, I said, my voice firm. You can love whoever you want, but you are wrong for being ashamed of your roots. A tree without roots falls over in the first wind. And tonight, you fell over. I pointed to the city skyline glittering in the distance. When you can stand on your own 2 feet, I said. When you can look me in the eye without needing a check or a favor. When you are proud of the name Moore, then you can come find me. But until then, you are on your own. Jamal stood there stunned. He had expected anger. He had expected yelling. But he hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to be cut loose. Just then, a sleek black car pulled up beside us. It wasn't a taxi, it was a Rolls-Royce. The window rolled down. It was Robert Sterling. He wasn't sitting in the back, he was driving. Thaddeus, Robert called out. I looked at him. Get in, Robert said. Leave the truck. I will have my staff pick it up in the morning and bring it to you. You shouldn't be driving tonight. You have had a long evening." I hesitated. I looked at my truck, my sanctuary. Then I looked at Jamal. If I drove away in my truck, he would think we were just back to normal. He would think he could just call me tomorrow and beg for money again. He needed to see a shift. He needed to see that the dynamic had changed forever. I looked at Robert. "Thank you, Robert. I would appreciate that." I walked over to the Rolls-Royce. Robert got out and opened the passenger door for me. He didn't let a chauffeur do it. He did it himself. It was a gesture of supreme respect. One man serving another, not out of duty, but out of honor. I got in. The leather was soft. The air was warm. Jamal watched us, his mouth hanging open. He watched as the billionaire opened the door for the mechanic. He watched as his father was treated like a king while he stood in the cold like a beggar. Robert walked around to the driver's side. He stopped and looked at Jamal. He didn't say a word. He just gave him a look of pity and disappointment. Then he got in and started the engine. The car purred to life. As we pulled away, I looked in the side mirror. I saw Jamal standing alone in the middle of the empty parking lot. The wind was whipping his expensive suit jacket around him. He looked small. He looked lost. He looked like a boy who had finally realized that the price of admission to the VIP room was his own soul, and he had paid it for nothing. "Are you okay, Thaddeus?" Robert asked quietly as we turned onto the main road. I watched my son disappear into the darkness. It broke my heart to leave him there. Every instinct in my body screamed to go back and pick him up, but I knew I couldn't. If I picked him up now, I would be carrying him forever, and he was too heavy. "I am okay, Robert," I said, staring straight ahead. "He has to learn." "He will," Robert said. "Sometimes the rock bottom is the only place solid enough to build a foundation on." I nodded. I hoped he was right. I hoped that out there in the cold, Jamal would finally find the fire that I knew was inside him somewhere. The fire that didn't destroy, but purified. We drove into the night, leaving the wreckage of the wedding behind us. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was filled with the understanding of two fathers who had tried their best and learned that sometimes love means walking away. 3 months, 90 days. That is exactly how long it takes for a life to completely disintegrate. 3 months ago, I was Tiffany Sterling, the heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, the girl who had a standing reservation at Le Monde and a closet full of clothes that cost more than most people earn in a year. I was an influencer. I was a brand. I was the girl everyone wanted to be. Now I am just the girl who forgot to put ketchup in the bag for order number 42. I stood behind the stainless steel counter of Burger Barn, wiping grease off the tray with a rag that smelled like old onions. My hands, the hands that used to display 3-carat diamonds, were red and chapped. My fingernails were cut short because the manager said long nails were a health code violation. I wasn't wearing white silk anymore. I was wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big and a hat that made my head itch. "Hey, lady, I said no pickles." The voice snapped me out of my misery. I looked up. A man in a stained tank top was holding a half-eaten burger in my face. He looked angry. He looked like the kind of person I would have crossed the street to avoid back in my old life. "I am sorry, sir," I muttered, keeping my eyes down. "I will fix it for you." "You better fix it," he grunted, tossing the greasy wrapper onto the counter. "And hurry up, I have a bus to catch." I took the burger back to the kitchen. The heat hit me like a physical blow. The air was thick with the smell of frying oil and despair. I scraped the pickles off the bun, my stomach turning. "Pick up the pace," Sterling, the manager, yelled from his office. He was a 19-year-old kid with acne and a power complex. He loved bossing me around. He knew who I was. Everyone knew who I was. That was the problem. The video. That cursed video. I still don't know who filmed it. Probably one of the caterers I had yelled at, or maybe even one of my so-called friends. But it didn't matter. It was everywhere. The video of my father slapping me. The video of me calling a hero a monster. The video of Thaddeus Moore tearing up $50,000 and throwing it in my face. It had 20 million views in 2 days. The comments were brutal. Hashtag monster bride. Hashtag daddy issues. Hashtag karma. My sponsors dropped me within hours. Glow Cosmetics sent a cease and desist letter demanding I stop using their products in my posts. Lux Water canceled my contract citing a morality clause. Even the boutique gym where I worked out canceled my membership because other members didn't want to be associated with me. And the debts. God, the debts. I had spent money I didn't have, assuming my trust fund would cover it. I had bought jewelry, I had leased a car, I had put down deposits on apartments. When Daddy cut the cards, the bills came due, and they came with lawyers. I had to sell everything. The bags, the shoes, the car, even the engagement ring Jamal gave me, which turned out to be worth a fraction of what he said it was. I wrapped the burger and handed it back to the customer. He snatched it without a thank you. I went on my break. 10 minutes. That was all I got. I walked out the back door toward the dumpsters. It was raining. A cold, miserable Chicago drizzle. I sat on an overturned milk crate and pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked because I couldn't afford to fix it. I scrolled to my contacts. Mommy. I hesitated. I had called her every day for 90 days. Every single day. Sometimes I cried, sometimes I yelled, sometimes I just breathed into the phone. I pressed the call button. One ring, then a click. The number you have reached is not accepting calls from this number. Please hang up and try again. Blocked. Still blocked. I tried Daddy's number. Same thing. I tried the house line. Disconnected. They had erased me. My own parents. The people who had spoiled me my entire life had treated me like a tumor that needed to be cut out. I sat there in the rain listening to the hum of the freezer unit, and I felt a surge of rage. It wasn't fair. I made a mistake, sure. I was rude. But to lose everything, to be working here, it was cruel. It is all his fault, I whispered, gripping the phone. Thaddeus Moore. That old man ruined my life. If he hadn't come to the rehearsal, if he had just stayed in his hole, none of this would have happened. He stole my parents. He stole my money. I heard the back door open. Sterling, get back in here, the manager yelled. The lunch rush is starting, and someone threw up in the lobby. You need to clean it. I gritted my teeth. I wiped the rain off my face and stood up. I walked back into the hell of frying grease. I grabbed the mop and bucket and went out to the lobby. It was crowded. People were eating, talking, ignoring the girl in the ugly uniform mopping the floor. On the wall above the soda machine there was a large flat-screen TV. It was usually tuned to a sports channel or a music video station. But today it was on the local news. Breaking news, the banner read. I stopped mopping. I looked up. The screen showed a large modern building made of glass and steel. It was beautiful. A crowd of people was gathered out front. There were cameras flashing, reporters shouting, and a red ribbon stretched across the entrance. And there in the center of the screen, standing behind a podium, was him. Thaddeus Moore. He was wearing a suit. A midnight blue suit with a red pocket square. The same one he wore the night he destroyed me. But he looked different. He stood tall, his shoulders back, his head high. The sun was shining directly on his face, illuminating the scars on the left side. He wasn't hiding them. He looked powerful. He looked like a king. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, Thaddeus Moore, Honorary Chairman of the Sterling Foundation. I dropped the mop. It clattered loudly on the tile floor, but I didn't hear it. I only heard the voice on the TV. Today is a historic day, the reporter said. The Sterling Foundation is proud to open the Moore Center for Burn Treatment and Recovery. This state-of-the-art facility is fully funded by the Sterling family and will provide free care to victims of fire and chemical burns. The camera panned out. Standing next to Thaddeus were my parents, Robert and Claire Sterling. My mother was looking at Thaddeus with a look of pure adoration. She was beaming, clapping her hands, her eyes shining with pride. My father stood on the other side, his hand resting on Thaddeus's shoulder. He looked happier than I had seen him in years. He looked like a man who had finally found a worthy heir. Thaddeus leaned into the microphone. His voice was deep and resonant, filling the restaurant lobby. I spent 30 years hiding my face, he said. I thought these scars were a sign of what I had lost. But my dear friends Robert and Claire showed me that they are actually a map of what I survived. My father nodded in the background, wiping a tear from his eye. This center isn't just a hospital, Thaddeus continued. It is a promise that no one has to walk through the fire alone. We are a family here, and family protects its own. Family. The word hit me like a bullet. He had taken my place. He wasn't just the chairman, He was the son they never had. He was the legacy. And then the reporter asked a question. Mr. Sterling, a quick word. This is a massive donation. Nearly $50 million. Where did the funding come from? The camera zoomed in on my father. He looked directly into the lens. It felt like he was looking right at me, right through the screen into the dirty lobby of the burger barn. Robert Sterling smiled. A cold, satisfied smile. We reallocated funds from a trust that was no longer serving a positive purpose, he said. We decided to invest in courage instead of vanity. We decided to invest in a real hero rather than a disappointment. A disappointment. He was talking about me. He was telling the whole world that he had taken my money, my future, my life, and given it to Thaddeus Moore. I felt my knees give way. I grabbed the edge of a table to steady myself. The customers in the restaurant were watching the TV too. "Wow," said a woman at the table next to me. "That is an amazing story. That old man is a hero." "Yeah," said her husband. "And look at the parents. They look so proud." That is what a real family looks like. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I was their daughter. I wanted to tell them that money was mine, but I couldn't. I looked down at my uniform. I looked at the mop bucket. I wasn't a Sterling anymore. I was just the help. On the screen, Thaddeus picked up a large pair of golden scissors. My parents put their hands over his, helping him hold them. Together, the three of them cut the red ribbon. The crowd cheered. Confetti rained down. Thaddeus hugged my mother. My father shook his hand and didn't let go. They looked complete. They looked happy, and there was no empty space where I used to be. The hole had been filled. I watched until the segment ended. I watched until the screen went back to a commercial for car insurance. "Hey, Sterling," the manager yelled from the back. "Quit watching TV and clean up that mess. We have customers waiting." I looked at the black screen. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked tired. I looked old. I looked like nobody. I picked up the mop. "Yes, sir," I whispered. I dipped the mop into the gray water and started to scrub the floor. Back and forth, erasing the dirt, just like I had been erased. Thaddeus Moore had won. He hadn't just beaten me. He had replaced me, and as I scrubbed the floor of that fast food restaurant for $7 an hour, I finally understood the lesson my father had tried to teach me. You can't buy class, and you can't buy character. You have to build it. And I had built my house on sand, and now the tide had finally come in. The construction site on the south side of Chicago was a symphony of chaos. It was a cacophony of jackhammers tearing into concrete, of diesel engines roaring, and of men shouting over the din of progress. Dust hung in the air like a thick gray curtain, coating everything in a layer of grit that tasted like limestone and sweat. I parked my old Ford truck across the street. I killed the engine, but I didn't get out. I just sat there watching. I was watching a young man in a neon yellow vest and a hard hat that looked too new. He was hauling bags of cement from a pallet to a mixer. Each bag weighed 80 pounds. I watched him struggle with the first one, his knees buckling slightly under the weight. I watched him drop it, heave it back up, and stagger toward the machine. Sweat was pouring down his face, carving rivers through the dust on his cheeks. His expensive haircut was matted and ruined. His soft hands, the hands that used to hold crystal champagne flutes, were now wrapped in cheap leather work gloves. It was Jamal. He wasn't an architect here. He wasn't a Sterling. He was a laborer, the lowest rung on the ladder. He was doing the work that breaks your back and builds your character. I watched him for 20 minutes. I wanted to see if he would quit. I wanted to see if he would throw down his gloves and walk away when the foreman yelled at him. I saw the foreman, a burly man with a neck like a tree stump, point a finger in Jamal's face, screaming about the pace of the work. Jamal didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. He just nodded, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and went back to the cement pile. He didn't quit. I reached over to the passenger seat. There was a metal lunchbox there. It was old, scratched, and dented. It was the same lunchbox I had carried to the firehouse for 30 years. Inside was a thermos of black coffee and 2 thick meatloaf sandwiches made with Beatrice's recipe. I opened the door of the truck and stepped out. My boots crunched on the gravel. I walked across the street, dodging a forklift. I walked right up to the chain-link fence. Jamal was bent over, catching his breath. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. But it was a good kind of broken. It was the kind of broken that happens before you get stronger. He looked up and saw me. He froze. For a second, I saw the old Jamal flicker in his eyes. The Jamal who hoped his daddy was coming to rescue him. The Jamal who hoped I had a check in my pocket to make the hard work go away. He straightened up, trying to look less tired, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "Dad," he said. His voice was raspy from the dust. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just nodded. "You are lifting with your back," I said. "You need to use your legs. Keep your spine straight, or you will be crippled by 40. Jamal looked at me confused. He wiped his hands on his dirty jeans. "Is that why you came?" he asked. "To give me safety tips?" "I came to bring you lunch," I said. I held the metal box over the fence. Jamal looked at it. He looked at the dents in the metal. He knew this box. He used to beg me to let him carry it when he was 5 years old. I can't take money, Dad," he said quietly, looking at his boots. "Robert blacklisted me. No architecture firm will hire me. This is the only job I could get. I am trying to do it on my own." "I didn't offer you money," I said. "I offered you a sandwich." "There is a difference." He reached out and took the box. His hands were trembling. I saw the blisters on his fingers, some of them popped and raw. He tried to hide them, curling his fingers into his palms. "Don't hide them," I said, sharp and quick. He flinched. "They are ugly, Dad. My hands are messed up. Let me see them." He slowly opened his hands. They were red, swollen, and bleeding. They were the hands of a man who had never done a day of hard labor in his life, suddenly thrown into the deep end. "They aren't ugly, Jamal," I said, my voice softening. "That is honest dirt. That is the first honest thing you have earned in 5 years. You don't hide that. You wear it, just like I wear my face." Jamal looked at his hands, then at my face. He nodded slowly, understanding the connection. The whistle blew for the lunch break. The noise of the jackhammers died down, leaving a ringing silence in the air. Other workers were finding spots in the shade to eat, sitting on upturned buckets or piles of lumber. "Come on," I said, pointing to the scaffolding that ran up the side of the half-finished building. "Let's sit." We climbed up to the second level. We sat on the wooden planks, our legs dangling over the edge. From here we could see the skyline of Chicago. We could see the shiny glass towers where Jamal used to work, where he used to sip expensive coffee and look down on the world. Now he was looking up at them from the bottom. He opened the lunchbox. The smell of the meatloaf hit him, and I saw his eyes water. He took a bite. He ate like a starving animal. He didn't care about table manners. He didn't care about crumbs. He just ate. "It is good," he mumbled with his mouth full. "It tastes like home." "It is your mother's recipe," I said, opening the thermos and pouring him a cup of coffee. "She always said a man can't build a future on an empty stomach." We sat there in silence for a while, just eating and watching the city move. The wind was cool up there, blowing the dust off our clothes. "I heard you are living in a studio apartment in the garment district," I said. Jamal nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, it is small. The heat doesn't work half the time. And the neighbors are loud." "Good," I said. He looked at me surprised. "Good, yes, good. Comfort makes you soft, Jamal. Struggle makes you sharp. You spent too long sleeping on silk sheets. You forgot how to wake up." "I know," he said quietly. "I know I messed up, Dad. I lost everything. Tiffany, the money, the reputation. I am a joke in this town." "You didn't lose anything that was real," I told him. "You lost a fantasy. You lost a mask." I took a sip of coffee. "You know why I didn't help you that night in the parking lot?" I asked. Jamal shook his head. "Because you were mad at me." "No, because I love you. If I had picked you up, if I had given you a check, you would have learned nothing. You would have just found another Tiffany. You would have found another mask. I had to let you fall, because you have to hit the ground to know where you stand." Jamal looked out at the city. "I am tired, Dad," he whispered. "I am so tired. Every muscle in my body hurts. I don't know if I can do this. I am not like you. You are a hero. You are strong. I am just an architect who got fired." I put my hand on his shoulder. I felt the muscle there tight and sore. "You think I wasn't tired?" I asked. "You think when I was carrying those hoses up 4 flights of stairs I wasn't tired? You think when I was lying in that burn unit wishing I could die just to stop the pain, I wasn't tired?" I turned him to face me. "Being a man isn't about not being tired, son. It is about being tired and doing it anyway. It is about realizing that nobody owes you a damn thing. Not me, not Robert Sterling, not the world." I pointed to the building rising around us. The steel beams, the concrete, the rebar. "Look at this place. It is ugly right now. It is messy. It is full of dust and noise. But in 6 months it will be a home. It will be something that stands against the wind. I tapped his chest right over his heart. That is you right now. You are under construction. It is messy. It hurts. But you are building something real. Jamal looked at me. His eyes were clear. The fog of entitlement was gone. The glaze of the scotch and the lies was gone. I saw my son. I want to make you proud, he said, his voice shaking. Then finish your sandwich, I said. And when that whistle blows, you get back down there and you carry those bags. You carry them until your arms feel like they are going to fall off. And then you carry one more. Why, he asked. Because that is how you build a house, I said. You build it by hand. You build it with sweat. You don't build it with your tongue. You don't build it with lies. You build it brick by brick. The whistle blew, loud and shrill. Jamal flinched. He looked at the half-eaten sandwich. He looked at the heavy bags of cement waiting for him below. He took a deep breath. He closed the lunchbox. Thanks for the lunch, Dad, he said. He stood up. He put his hard hat back on. He pulled the leather gloves over his blistered hands. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for a ride home. I will see you later, he said. He climbed down the ladder. I watched him go. I watched him walk back to the pile. I watched him bend his knees, grab a bag, and heave it onto his shoulder. He staggered a bit, but he didn't drop it. He walked forward one step at a time. I sat there on the scaffolding for a long time. The afternoon sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the city. The light hit my face. I could feel the warmth on my scars. For years I had looked in the mirror and seen a tragedy. I had seen a map of pain. But sitting there watching my son work, watching him sweat, watching him become a man, I realized something. These scars weren't a punishment. They were a roadmap. They were the evidence that I had walked through the fire and survived. And now my son was walking through his own fire. I touched the left side of my face. The skin was rough and uneven, but under the golden light of the Chicago sun, it didn't feel ugly. It felt like gold. It felt like a medal pinned to my skin by God himself. I packed up the thermos. I climbed down the ladder. I walked back to my truck. I didn't say goodbye to Jamal. He had work to do, and so did I. I started the engine. The old Ford rumbled to life. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw a young man building a wall. He wasn't a Sterling. He wasn't an orphan. He was Jamal Moore, and he was finally exactly where he was supposed to be. It has been a year since the wedding that never happened. The seasons in Chicago have changed, turning from the biting cold of that winter into a warm, golden autumn. The leaves on the trees in my front yard are turning red and orange, matching the fire that once defined my life, but they no longer remind me of pain. They remind me of change. They remind me that things can fall apart and come back together more beautiful than before. Tiffany is gone. The last I heard, she had moved to Los Angeles trying to restart her career as an influencer. She posts pictures of avocado toast and borrowed handbags trying to convince strangers that she is happy. But I know the truth. I know that she is chasing a ghost. She is chasing a version of herself that was funded by a check that no longer exists. She sent a letter to her parents about 6 months ago. It wasn't an apology. It was a request for money to pay for a lawyer because she was being sued by a landlord. Robert burned the letter in the fireplace. He didn't say a word while he did it. He just watched the paper curl and turn to ash, and I saw the finality in his eyes. He had grieved the daughter he thought he had and accepted the reality of who she was. We haven't spoken her name since. My relationship with the Sterlings has become the anchor of my new life. They didn't just write a check for the burn center and disappear. They became a part of my daily rhythm. Robert comes over every Tuesday evening. He parks his Rolls-Royce right behind my rusted Ford truck and doesn't care who sees it. We sit on my back porch and play chess. He is a brilliant businessman, but he is a terrible chess player. He plays with his head, too worried about the risks. I play with my gut. I beat him 3 times out of 4. Claire comes over on Sundays. She brings pies. She brings gossip from the high society world she lives in, and we laugh about how ridiculous it all is. She treats me like a brother. She treats me like the only person in the world who truly knows the weight of the life she is living because I am the one who gave it to her. We don't talk about the fire much anymore. We don't have to. It is the silent bond that sits between us, comfortable and unbreakable. And then there is Jamal. He came over last night. It was late and he looked exhausted. He is still working construction. He has been promoted to site foreman now because he showed up early every day for 6 months and never complained. His hands are still rough. His skin is tanned from the sun and his back is broader. He doesn't wear Italian suits anymore. He wears flannel shirts and work boots, and he looks more like a man than he ever did in a tuxedo. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I polished my metal. He put a white envelope on the table and slid it across to me. I opened it. Inside was $500 in cash, 20s and 10s worn and dirty. "What is this?" I asked. "It is the first installment," he said. "Installment for what?" "For the $50,000, he said, looking me in the eye. "I know you tore up the check, Dad. I know the money is gone. But I am going to pay it back. Every single cent. I don't care how long it takes. That was your blood money and I disrespected it. I am going to make it right." I looked at the money. I looked at my son. I didn't push it back. I didn't tell him to keep it, because that would have been an insult. He needed to pay this debt, not for me, but for himself. He needed to buy back his own dignity. I took the envelope and nodded. "Thank you, son," I said. "I will put it in the safe." He smiled. It was a real smile. Not the fake, camera-ready smile he used to practice for Tiffany. It was a tired, genuine smile of a man who knows exactly who he is. We ate dinner together. We talked about his job. We talked about the Bears game. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about the lies. We just sat there, two men, sharing a meal in a house built on truth. After he left, I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. I looked at the left side of my face. The purple ridges were still there. The pulled skin was still there. The missing ear was still there. For 30 years, I had looked at this reflection and seen a curse. I had seen a wall that separated me from the rest of the world. I had seen a reason for people to turn away. But tonight, I saw something different. I saw a filter. These scars aren't a wall. They are a gate. They keep out the shallow people. They keep out the Tiffanys of the world. They keep out the people who only care about surface appearances. And they let in the people who matter. They let in the Roberts and the Claires, who see the sacrifice behind the ugly. They let in the truth. My face is a litmus test for the human soul. If you can look at me and see the man, then you are worth knowing. If you look at me and see a monster, then I know I don't need you in my life. It took me 71 years to realize it, but I am glad I have these scars. They saved Robert and Claire. They saved my son from a loveless marriage, and in the end they saved me. I turned off the light and went to bed. The house was quiet. But it wasn't the lonely quiet of an old man waiting to die. It was the peaceful quiet of a man who has fought his war, won his battles, and is finally resting in the victory of his own self-respect. We live in a world obsessed with filters and flawless appearances, often forgetting that the most beautiful scars are the ones earned through sacrifice. My face was a map of pain, but to those who knew the truth, it was a symbol of love. True nobility isn't found in expensive suits or prestigious bloodlines. It is found in the courage to stand for others when the fire gets hot. Don't judge a book by its cover, because sometimes the most tattered covers hold the most heroic stories. Respect your history, respect your parents, for they bear the burns so you don't have to. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have a scar that tells a story, or if you know a hero who walks among us unnoticed. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that true beauty comes from within. Thank you for listening, and remember to stand tall no matter what life throws at you.